Hello and welcome to One Week, One Year, a podcast where we watch and discuss every year of film history in order, starting in 1895, the dawn of cinema. This episode is 1944. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Ellie. I'm a film projectionist, and joining me as always is...
I'm Glenn Covell. I'm a filmmaker.
And joining us for the first time...
I'm Sarah Pepe. I am Chris's partner, and I'm also a therapist.
Yes, you're here to talk about some kind of well, I guess we could say mental health infused titles.
Yeah.
But also you have a master's degree in media studies. So I guess makes
I have a master's I have a master's degree in English literature.
I thought you kind of had a media
No.
English
I
literature.
don't.
But that's the same thing though, isn't it?
In a way. I wrote my my master's thesis about television shows. So.
Yeah, okay. Man, I probably shouldn't be getting confused about something so elemental about the person I've been with for 5 years.
It's not that important. It literally is not that important.
Also, the English literature, I feel like relevant to this year of movies. Somewhat.
True. Is one of them a book?
I think several were books, but...
Oh, I mean, that just shows that I don't know anything.
Putting your master's degree to shame.
Speaking of you not knowing anything, tell us a little bit about your history with old movies.
Well, my father is a big film guy, and when I was growing up, he often forced me to watch old movies. And I think I was forced to watch Citizen Kane when I was 12, and you can imagine how well that went. So
Swimmingly, out of my favorite movie. I'm
right.
sure every 12-year-old loves Deep Focus.
Oh yeah. He also tried to show me 2001: A Space Odyssey around that time, and I was like, what are these monkeys? Like, why are we doing this? But I've come around on that one.
But not Citizen Kane, you're still averse.
Well, Chris and I watched it recently when you guys discussed it, and I didn't think I wasn't that into it, but I can see why it's a good movie.
And have you heard the show before?
Piecemeal, I have.
You've heard the show coming from another room, just
yes,
emanating.
Sorry,
yes.
I just knew that I was going to choose this segment to rip on you a little bit.
Great.
You've heard the show in the context of Chris poking his head out of a door and going, "Please be quiet."
Yes,
I have to record a podcast.
Yes,
which is what I used to have to do, but now I don't.
Nice, congrats.
Now the only thing making noise around me is my refrigerator.
Great.
Well, how's everybody doing? What's we got a little bit of the banter segment over, but what's going on in your lives, everybody?
Nothing.
I just got tattooed, and I'm tired from being tattooed.
Tired, tattooed, and top of the morning to you.
Well,
sure.
we'll revisit that. We'll come back. We'll edit in a good third.
A better joke.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm the banter segment is over. We like to it's astounding that we've done so many of these, and it feels like we're making it up as we go along every time.
That's the beauty of it. It's off the cuff, you know?
Yeah. Well, anyway, we like to give ourselves a little bit of context for what's going on in the year of which we are speaking, with a little bit of news. So, Glenn, why don't you take it away?
The news of the year, 1944. Franklin Delano Roosevelt says the U.S. Constitution is inadequate. His solution? A second Bill of Rights, guaranteeing employment, a living wage, antitrust enforcement, housing, medical care, education, and social security. Rudolf Wilber and Alfred Wetzler escape from Auschwitz. They create a report showing the world never before seen internal details of the horrors within. Sartre's No Exit premieres in Nazi-occupied France. D-Day! British and American troops sweep the Normandy coast. Over 150,000 soldiers invade occupied France and begin to turn the tide in the European theater. The Allies claim victory in Operation Overlord as they take Paris back from the Nazis. Noted terrible soprano Florence Foster Jenkins performs a sold-out show at Carnegie Hall, singing through the jeers. The longest entertainment industry strike in history comes to an end after over 2 years, winning musicians royalties for their recorded works. The inaugural Golden Globe Awards are held at the 20th Century Fox Studios.
And that is some of the news of 1944. To give a little,
Yeah.
a little context, a little, what's going on in the world.
I like pulled out almost every non-horrific thing that I could find.
I mean, there were a lot of those, as we have often the 1940s just rife with horrors. So
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get into shorts, but I guess we'll say so. We're gonna hop to 1 week, 1 reel, and we'll just do that, the two of us, and then Sarah will join us back again for our first two films. So catch you later. So we watched a couple of Maya Deren shorts.
Mhm.
I don't know if it makes sense to talk about these together or one at a time.
I guess sort of together. I kind of want to start with which is Cradle, because that is not really a film, in my opinion.
Oh, hot take.
Well, it feels very unfinished, which from the little amount of reading I've done about it, it is. But it really feels unfinished, especially compared to the other Maya Deren movie we watched and the previous one that we watched last episode. Like it feels like just the mostly just like the raw footage that someone found, like the reel.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's kind of what it is. Like, it was a project that was never really finished, and they found the footage of it, and they're like, yeah, sure, let's show this to people.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I wasn't really drawing a parallel between the thing that's saying this somewhat unfinished, but then also that, like, you can kind of see jumpy splices and you can see, like, the leader of the film in between certain shots.
Yeah, a
I
lot of
kind of
stuff
just
is repeated because it's just, I don't think it's like intentionally like repetitive stuff. I think it's
well,
just,
it says
they were
the
just
end.
doing
The end is the
multiple takes.
beginning, and the beginning is the end. Well,
I
like,
know, but
it's
when it's like someone looking, like turning and looking 4 times in a row, I think that's just 4 takes of the same thing. I don't think that is a an avant-garde editing thing. I think that it's just multiple takes.
Hey, when it's
I think
avant-garde, who knows?
true,
So
but like all of the flashing, it's like that's just what happens when you like stop a film camera and start it again, because it's like the light hitting the frame. I don't know.
I mean, well,
And I'm
speaking
not saying
of,
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just, it's like not.
yeah.
It's cool to see, and I'm glad that it's available for people to see.
Well, so Witch's Cradle is I would say that it is more straightforwardly depicting something than either of her other two movies that we've watched. In that,
Hmm.
like, it is a witch doing witchy stuff, right? Like, doing some kind of incantation. It's represented by string in some way, and like,
String on a string. Yep.
the other ones are just kind of a, like, dream logic, a bunch of stuff happening, kind of linking together themes, but that's like, you know it's not like an event that is happening.
Yeah, I guess. I feel
Well,
like
okay, so what are you
I'm sounding very negative on this one. I think it's mostly just because I was like, oh, this isn't really a film. This is like the footage someone shot of a film.
I guess, I don't know, I mean, maybe I'm not giving avant-garde
But see,
non-literal art enough credit, but it all kind of feels like it could be a
well, I
film,
don't know. It felt very distinctly different from the other two that we watched, because I feel like there's,
Hmm.
as much as they are dealing in like dream logic and kind of surreal imagery and things like that, there is a real kind of intention behind it that I get from it anyway, that I don't see in Witch's Cradle. Not in the sense that like there is an intention behind how things are being framed or shot, or, but it's like the editing is just feels so completely different from from the other two that I'm like, oh, this is just
Hmm.
unedited. This is just the real of
Hmm.
film. And yeah, so I do think it feels very distinctly different from the other two for that reason, and that it's like the rhythms of it, and who knows, maybe that was all intended to be like how the finished thing was going to look. I don't know, but I definitely did not get that sense from watching it. If anything, it's a real proof or an example anyway of like how important editing is, because like I feel like you watch At Land, the other one that we watched for 1944, and it does feel very deliberate. It has a flow to it, and it's like it feels like a finished product. And I feel
Mm.
like Witch's Cradle is just kind of like a lot of stuff.
Yeah. We could transition over to At Land. One thing that is going on with both of these movies is she's got some kind of art world collaborators with big
Mm.
names on each. Witch's Cradle being Marcel Duchamp, and At Land having some involvement with John Cage.
John Cage. I definitely know the name John Cage. I did not do enough reading, clearly.
John Cage, I mean, he is a classical composer, but he does some kind of like avant-garde kind of stuff.
Mm.
Most famously, 433, which is
Oh,
yeah,
that thing.
which is somebody going up to a piano and sitting there not playing it for 4 minutes and 33
Yeah.
seconds. Which I think is based. I love it.
Yeah. You're a big fan of 433?
I am. I
I've never seen it performed, so I don't. Who's to
you know,
say what I really think of it?
here's
Because
the thing,
I
I've
don't. It
never seen
doesn't
it
count.
performed either, and I really feel like I should, because
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
the whole thing with it is like all of the ambient noise of the room becomes the performance, right?
Mm. Marcel Duchamp is also a composer. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, he made art in galleries and stuff. Marcel Duchamp did the urinal that like is like he put the urinal down and flipped it sideways and called it art, and then people were like, oh no, how could you?" Um, which
I mean,
also
that rules.
which I also think is based.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah, a complete side note, but like 433, right? John Cage's 433. I thought I was so slick because I set so on Tinder you can set like an anthem for yourself. It's just like another thing that you can put on your profile. A lot of
You
people
made yours 433.
I made mine 433. You could pick one song that just kind of shows up on your profile, and it's a conversation
Oh,
starter. And I
I mean,
was
that's a
just like,
conversation starter if ever there was one.
it took a lot of doing to make it work. Like I had to search in some weird ways to make it
Yeah.
to be able to find
That
it.
is
But
that I love the degree to which you are like shit posting on Tinder.
oh, you
That's
simply
incredible.
must. You simply
Yeah.
must. Atland is her other more finished work from
Hmm.
44. Um, Definitely going along with the dreamy kind of stuff as established in Meshes of the Afternoon. This feels like it's kind of going with some different. This is going for some different motifs. I feel like it feels a
Hmm.
little less scary, a little less aggressive.
Yeah,
Uh,
less threatening. There's some threatening stuff in it a little bit, but yeah, overall it is a nicer feeling movie
yeah,
than
not that it's like specifically nice,
Meshes.
but it's like it.
Yeah, but I mean it's there's no like mirror faced presence that's like following you around in this one.
Yeah, yeah. This one I think is doing some kind of interesting stuff with like melding space together. Like there's like a point where
Mm,
it starts
yeah,
off with her on a beach and like she is kind of climbing on top of this piece of wood, and as she climbs onto this piece of wood, she's like entering a different reality, like with matched movements, where she's
yeah.
like pulling herself up onto a table of a bunch of business guys. uh
That happens a couple times in this one, and that to me feels like a very like distinctly dreamlike thing of like
mhm.
moving between different kind of spaces without there being a real transition point, like not entering through a door, or it's just
Yeah.
like this thing of like, yeah, I was on a beach and then I like climbed a tree, and then like from the tree I somehow got climbed onto a business meeting table, like, but the tree wasn't connected to anything else. It was just like it just kind of happened. That
Yeah,
feels very dreamlike to me.
I know that the MO of a lot of like classic surrealists is to kind of unlock this dreamy, unconscious kind of thing. I don't know if she was really going for a specific, like, I'm going to make a movie that feels like dreams, but
Mm,
definitely there's a lot of the specificity of the way that dreams work that is captured in her
yeah.
movies. In
Also,
the same
speaking
way
of,
that like I felt disappointed when I saw Inception because I'm like, this isn't how dreams work.
Inception, the opening shots of this movie of Atland are almost identical to the opening shots of Inception.
Oh wow.
Like
So he has seen movies that depict
yeah,
dreams better.
both start with like slow motion waves crashing and then someone waking up on the beach. And it's even like I got to go back to Inception and maybe check the framing, but it seemed like even the framing was like fairly similar.
Hmm.
I have no idea if this movie was a direct influence on Inception or not. It very well could have been, but yeah, that immediately stuck out to me. I mean, good taste, Chris Nolan.
This definitely, I feel like the biggest motif in this is chess.
Yeah, a lot of chess stuff.
There's like different chess games, and they're being played in different contexts, and I think that like gives them a different feeling. Like,
Hmm.
there is the first chess game that you see is at that table full of these businessmen or something, and
Yeah, and
like
they're all like there's like smoke hanging in the air from all of their cigarettes, and it's like that scene looks really cool. I think it's like dark office room. It's kind of you can't really entirely tell like what kind of room you're in, but there's like really high ceiling and like the smoke wafting up, and they're all kind of all these people are just like along the two sides of the table as Maya Deren is like crawling along the table. Yeah, I know that scene was just very striking to me.
yeah, and it feels like there's some there's been some kind of I don't know if I like always 100% like fully read like a specific feminist angle to the stuff,
Hmm.
but like there is some kind of juxtaposition between the chessboard with the men,
Hmm.
and there's a later chessboard with women. um and like the scene has a very different vibe to it. It starts off with like almost, you know this movie isn't so threatening like Meshes of the Afternoon, but it is it's eerie at times.
Yeah,
And that chess thing almost feels like a break with when you see the women playing the chess on the beach, and then it feels like, oh, it's chill for a second, and then they start getting like happier and happier and happier, and it's like they're playing chess in this state of extreme ecstasy, and you're like, okay, this is scary again.
it's getting threatening again. Yeah, I also definitely picked up on this movie playing with a little bit more ideas of like what does gender even mean, man? Like a little that maybe is reductive way of putting it, but like I do feel like there was more of a sense of like how like male characters and female characters are being framed and kind of
Hmm.
portrayed in this one,
Hmm.
as opposed to well, I mean, as opposed to Mansions of the Afternoon, which only has what three characters: a man, a woman, and a ghost. So it's like there's not a whole lot to like play around with.
It's a classic
As opposed to
story:
this,
a man, a woman, and a
yeah,
ghost.
the Holy Trinity, yeah. Um, so yeah, I do feel like much like Mansions in the Afternoon, I'm not even really gonna attempt to try to like unpack what this movie is trying to say, because like one, I don't necessarily know if that is 100% the intent of it. I think there are meanings behind all of the imagery in this, much like in Masters of the Afternoon, but I don't think it matters if whatever my impression of that
Hmm.
is, if that's the same as what my Darren's like intent was. Like I think it's much more of a like, here's the thing I made, like make of it like any work of sort of like impressionistic art. I think
Hmm.
it's less about like it having a like very specific meaning. And maybe that's
Yeah.
just me being lazy and not wanting to analyze it further. But you know, you decide.
There was a I thought that like maybe the most striking image in this to me was the white king chess piece floating down the river.
Mm,
Something about that felt like really kind of interesting as far as just this like machined or like carved object that is so unnatural, like moving
mm,
through like kind of chaotically moving through like a babbling brook or like a somewhat chaotic
mhm.
waterfall or something. uh I don't know what it means, but it
I
was
mean,
kind of
I will
cool.
say when that happened, when the chess piece like falls into the water, I was like, "Oh no!" I felt so bad. I felt so like such a sense of like, "No, it fell." Which again, like Missions of the Afternoon, it is not intended to have a soundtrack over it, or at least didn't initially. Um, so it's like it's just silent imagery coming at me, and I still felt this sense of like, no, the chess piece, don't let it float away. Like there's kind of a I don't know, just there's something primal to that a little bit, I think.
Hmm. We watched the final short from our gang, Little
Hmm.
Rascals.
Yeah.
They have been around since the silent era, and they've been kind of, I guess, sort of petering out a bit. And
Hmm.
1944 was the last year that they existed, and so we watched one, which seems like it's not a big finisher. It just seems like a pretty
No,
typical.
it's not the series finale. It's just kind of an right. It's just kind of a short.
It's just
Yeah.
here's one. And
Yeah.
some of these series is good to kind of periodically check back. Uh,
Hmm.
and yeah, so we got some flavors of different eras of our gang. It's cute kids doing cute kid stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the last one stuck out to me, I guess, in that like kind of the main POV character in this one, because it usually changes. They like a kind of rotating stock
Yeah,
of of kids. And the kind of main kid in this one is Froggy.
Froggy.
Is his they all have nicknames. They all have kind of like silly kid nickname names. And I guess Froggy is so named because he has a voice that sounds like a frog, and it's just the kid is just doing a crazy voice the whole time, and I love it.
Yeah, he's kind of
He's talking like this the whole time.
But he's like a 7-year-old. He's just like, "Hey, what's going
well,
on?"
it's not.
Hey,
He doesn't have an
kids.
accent.
He kind of does. I'm exaggerating it, but yeah, he's got this kind of really kind of like deep, like guttural, craggly voice that is just a thing that's just a voice that kid could do. And they were like, "We're gonna build your whole character out of this."
Hey, the girl will take me dancing. I like to dance. I'm gonna learn to dance.
Probably the biggest laugh in the whole thing for me is when he's like, "I'm gonna do something crazy," and the other kids are like, "You're gonna kill yourself," and he goes, "No, I'm gonna learn to dance." An even scarier thing. And yeah, he does a whole. There's a whole sort of right. He likes this girl who is always. She's only about dancing, and
Yeah,
she has her dance partner, her fancy kid dance partner who wears like a tuxedo all the time.
the heel of this short.
I do love the world that these shorts exist in, where there's just like a kid who wears a tuxedo.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's just he's the fancy one.
And they've got like an invitation to a dance recital, and it's got like that like childly
Right,
like
all the
misspellings and
words are
everything.
misspelled. Yeah,
It's very classic, cute kid stuff.
yeah, for sure. And so during the dance recital, he gets put on a wire hidden behind the curtain, so that he's like doing all these like kind of spins and dance things, like leaping up in the air and doing stuff, and everyone's like, "Oh, amazing! How could this be possible?"
Yeah, and
And then
the
the heel kid goes backstage and it's like, "Aha, a trick!" But he reveals it, and the kid falls from a great height when the wire gets cut. But
is it-
the
I know I faked dancing, but I did it so that I could get closer to you.
And then it works. And then the girl is like, "Oh, that's so sweet." And we end on that.
And
It's
then
nice short, like,
series wrap on our gang.
yeah, series wrap on Our Gang. Great, 10 minutes in and out. Yeah, I mean, I feel like this movie kind of, I guess, retroactively kind of has a bit of melancholy to it because it's like, oh, this is the last one. They like didn't make any more after this. That's kind of a bummer. But I also get the sense that like, I don't know, they had a good run, right? This was like
They went for like
multi
20 years.
multi-decade series.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, right, kids like age out of it and left, and then they brought new kids in and things. This one, I guess, also notable for one of the kids is Robert Blake, who was a noted child actor and later murderer. Did not know about Robert Blake.
No.
He was one of the Our Gang kids, and then later in life, he murdered somebody, and was also in Lost Highway, the David Lynch movie.
Was that before or after killing somebody?
I believe that was after the murder, but before he was kind of properly like accused of it
Huh.
or something. I'm not sure. It might have been before the murder. I don't know if David Lynch would have cast him if he
It was
like he
before.
murdered somebody.
It was before.
Okay. I get the sense David Lynch probably cast him because he was in Our Gang. Because David Lynch loves a like legacy actor.
I
or,
love
like, cast
old
former
stuff.
Yes, I mean, very true. That was kind of one of his big things.
The Little Rascals is the greatest television series ever made.
Have we mentioned how like Our Gang got like rebranded to Little Rascals when it was on TV?
It was
That's
some kind of
how I was familiar with it.
Yeah. I thought it was called Little Rascals. I had like a DVD. I think a lot of this stuff is like public domain now, or is cheap or something
Yeah.
like that.
I
So they were like,
definitely
they're
had
like
a VHS with a couple
yeah,
of shorts on it.
a lot of like
Yeah.
DVDs and videotapes just sprang up everywhere. Of just like, watch this. It's classic.
Yeah.
And
Well, then
yeah.
in the 90s, they made a movie called Little Rascals.
Yes. But as you were alluding to, the machinations of the name change kind of have to do with who owns the rights to the name. If it's MGM or whoever else.
God, I hate that stuff so much. I hate things being intellectual property.
This is why I am constantly calling for an end to all intellectual property.
I mean, there's very good arguments for it, especially once the creators of it have passed on. Like, that's really the only reason it exists, is to like protect people's, like, if you make something, you should get a cut of it. But you know, it is sort of like, what are we? Fritz Lang movies should just, everyone should just, you get free Blu-rays, like just print them.
All right, this is
give them to me.
So the last short that we watched was the Academy Award winning Tom and Jerry short Mouse Trouble.
And what a short it is.
Which is just classic Tom and Jerry stuff.
Right, because I feel like the last time we watched Tom and Jerry, it was this like, not quite proto Tom and Jerry, but it was their early ones, right? And it's like we could tell like they hadn't quite ironed it out fully yet.
They weren't even like, called Tom and Jerry yet.
Right, exactly. Tom is what, Jasper in the first one? This Mouse Trouble is like the ultimate Tom and Jerry. It's like, Mouse Trouble is like, you want to know what Tom and Jerry is? It's this. Like, this has everything that Tom and Jerry is about in its runtime.
It's got some really great gags in it. A lot of the stuff with like text in it is funny. Like, I really got a laugh out of Tom reading. He's reading this How to Catch Mice book, and it's just published by Random Mouse.
I know that it's such a good joke, and it's like, it goes by like that. It's so quick, but there's the bit where Jerry holds up a note that says, what does it say? It says like, somebody call a doctor or something.
Yeah, as he has done some more extreme than usual violence to Tom.
Right, which then like they don't it's like he peeks into this box that he's like sawed in half and stuck pins through, and then it's like, oh dear.
He's like, oh no, I've gone too far.
And then it just cuts to the next scene, and Tom is like, has bandages all over, including around his waist, implying that he was cut in half and somehow healed.
Very itchy and scratchy. Uh,
Yeah.
one also other text joke is Tom is trying to. So the setup is that Tom's trying to catch Jerry. He
Yeah.
gets a book. He tries the strategies in the book. They fail. Uh, and
They fail in very Tom and Jerry / like Roadrunner-esque
yeah,
way, right? He puts the cheese on the mousetrap and then he eats cheese off the mousetrap and he goes check the trap and it snaps on his finger.
yeah.
Right? Classic.
Mice are suckers for dames, the book says.
something we're all aware of, right? Yeah, we all know mice are suckers for dames, right?
So he makes a robotic mouse to lure Jerry into his
Of
mouth.
course. The simplest solution, a robot mouse.
Or he sets up like a little fake hotel facade for
Yeah.
Jerry to take the dame into, and his mouth is on the other side, but he crunches down too quick, and he chomps on a piece of metal.
Breaks all his teeth and then keeps hiccuping, and all of his hiccups have the repeated line that the robot mouse says, which is, I just watched this like minutes ago and I already forgot what the line was, but
I couldn't quite make it out.
yeah, the robot mouse keeps saying, "Come up and see me sometime." I think it's like very quick and it's very high pitched. But so then after he eats it, whenever Tom hiccups, he keeps saying, "Come up and see me sometime. Come up and see me sometime." Which would be rough for that to happen if you ate a robot mouse. Another like audio joke that I had to look up because I did not understand what it meant.
I'm glad you looked this up because I was like, is that a reference? It's got to be a reference, right?
It is a reference. So there's a bit right where one of the things in the book that Tom reads is like a cornered mouse will never fight. And so he's like, all right, here we go. Time to start a fight that I can win. And then off screen, we see a bunch of, smoke and stuff flying off. And then Tom walks back into frame and he's all beat up. And he looks directly at the camera and says in like a spooky ghost voice, "Don't you believe it?" Which I was like, weird choice, but okay. But I was like, I feel like I've heard that somewhere else, or like, is that right? Is that a reference to something? It is a reference to, in the 1930s and 40s, there was a radio show called "Don't You Believe It" that was sort of a like Beyond Belief or like Ripley's Believe It or Not type of thing. Like, is this story true or not? And in the the opening of it, there was a spooky voice that said, "Don't you believe it?" That was the like start of the show. So that was a sort of timely pop culture reference that they threw in there that right now watching Tom and Jerry cartoons, we're like, what does this mean? Why does he have a ghost voice?
But yeah, good animation, really good gags.
Yeah, real smooth, real slick. There's the bit where he tries to, he gets fed up with the book. He rips the book up, and so he's just gonna blow up Jerry. He just puts a bunch of dynamite barrels that say TNT on them, and then also just like a World War II bomb that I think says Blockbuster on it. He just sticks all that in front of the hole in the wall. And of course it blows up the entire house except for where Jerry is. Like just the little section, the little tiny section of wall with the hole in it is the only thing that's left. And then we see Tom floating up as an angel to heaven, but he's still hiccuping the robot mouse voice. And we get our nice little big the end title card. And it's again like it gets in, it gets out. It's just a bunch of good cartoon gags, well timed, well executed. I feel like there's not a lot else to say about it. It's just like, yeah, good Tom and Jerry cartoon.
Yeah. If you like Tom and Jerry cartoons, watch Tom and Jerry cartoons.
Yeah. If you've never seen a Tom and Jerry cartoon, this is the one to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess we're ready for our feature presentation.
And now we're pleased to bring you our feature presentation.
Well, our guest, do you want to pick which of the two you'd like to talk about first?
Might as well start with Gaslight.
Gaslight.
Yeah.
See the part of the tricky thing about about having a guest is that the guest usually talks about the big daddy of the year, and we usually save the big daddies for the last for the last piece.
We just jump right in though, and I feel like
So
this is a
yeah,
good. I feel like this year has like a lot of bangers, so
indeed.
we can kind of just get right into it.
So Gaslight. Shall we summarize?
Gaslight is about a woman whose mother is murdered horrifically, and so she moves away from her London apartment, and while studying abroad and elsewhere in Europe, she falls in love with this very charming piano player, and they get married. And the piano player is like, "I would love to live in an apartment overlooking a town square," and she's like, "Funny you should say that. I happen to own an apartment overlooking a town square in London, but like FYI, I hate it there because of murders." But they go back there, they move back in, and immediately the woman, what's her name? See, this is why we should write down plot synopses. It's because I forget character names.
Ingrid Bergman.
Ingrid Bergman starts to, it's like it seems like she's getting forgetful. She's like, there's like weird sounds around the house that no one else seems to be able to hear. But spoilers, it's all been suggested into her head because of her sinister new husband, who is actually both a murderer and a jewel thief? Question mark.
He did all of this to steal some jewels.
Right. But so all of this, all of Act 2 is this big sort of her sort of descent into madness. But then the descent into madness is very quickly revealed to be entirely this guy's sort of like, she's not getting forgetful. He's stealing stuff from her and being like, "Oh, you forgot this. You forgot where you put it. Oh man, oh, I guess you better stay home." And he's doing a lot of psychological manipulation, so much so, and in such a this movie is such a textbook example that it has now become the verb for a specific type of manipulation, which is pretty crazy.
You all know what gaslighting is.
I mean, do we don't have to explain what gaslighting is, right? I mean, if not, if anyone doesn't know what gaslighting is, I feel like listen to the rest of the conversation about the movie and that'll give you a clue.
I think that one of the interesting things actually is like the way that the term gaslighting as it exists today has somewhat diverged from the kind of specific way that it is implemented in this movie.
Right. I guess it is the way in which the movie uses it, or the character in the movie uses it, and then also the way in which I guess the verb was attached to that is I think a lot more specific, right, than it is used now. It's become a bit more of an umbrella term, or it's at least its definition has widened, I think.
I guess the umbrella term being kind of like a type of psychological manipulation that is sometimes almost passive, sometimes not even on purpose, of somebody kind of doubting, sowing seeds of doubt in another person's mind. My understanding, honestly, would be that most of the time that gaslighting happens, like gaslighting in this movie is this calculated Machiavellian thing in order to steal jewels, and and in reality, my understanding is that it's probably a bit more of like a natural outgrowth of certain manipulative people's like way of interacting with the world.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I'm probably not the one to like speak on that as much as you, Sarah, as the
Yeah.
the brain expert of the show. I do think of gaslighting as a pretty like specific, or not as a pretty like intentional thing.
Yeah.
I think it would be hard to like accidentally gaslight someone, at least to the degree to which I don't know. I definitely think of gaslighting more in the sense of how it is in the movie than maybe like. I do think gaslighting has maybe become a little bit overused, where people do attribute it to things that aren't gaslighting. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I think like in the popular use, it's kind of like anytime someone is not on the same page with someone else about what happened, Like it's kind of used freely in that way, but I do think like true gaslighting would be like it's done very intentionally, like it's seen in the
Hmm.
movie.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I guess the like kind of core way I would define it is like convincing someone to mistrust their own uh senses
Yeah,
and like
perception,
and
memory.
reason. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perception. There you go.
Did you see any kind of echoes of reality in this movie?
Yeah. Um I think what's shown in the movie is pretty extreme. Like it's extremely calculated. Um but it's definitely like a common abuse tactic to like just deny that something happened. And like in particular, I think it's something that is often employed by like people with pretty significant psychological issues, like people with personality disorders and whatnot. Yeah, it's like a classic in the narcissist playbook, not to throw around another overused therapy word.
Yeah. I think it's interesting like how I mean cuz maybe speaking to more of that like subtle difference that this movie maybe what I was trying to get at is like gaslighting as it is applied now is sort of um trying to it feels a little bit more specific, right? There is an instance that you want to be able to like that you as like a gaslighter want to be able to rewrite the narrative on. And so you gaslight in order to rewrite that narrative. Where in this movie, it is not the gaslighting is not about any specific thing that he is gaslighting about. It is about just making her lose touch with reality so much that she just kind of crumbles and he can do whatever he wants, like steal jewels.
There is some amount of right because I mean the title comes from the her noticing that the gas lamps in the apartment are dimming, which the way that gas lamps work in the olden times is if you turned on lights in a different part of the house, the lights in the room you're in would dim because like the gas has to flow to a different part of the house. And so because the husband is upstairs in the attic looking for jewels, he's turning on the lamp up there and it's dimming the lights in Ingrid Bergman's room, and she's like, I
Right.
see the lights dimming. And both he and then also the maid that he hires are being like, no, I don't see any lights dimming. And so it is like somewhat to like cover up his illicit activities and to
Mhm.
make her, I guess, a kind of a less credible witness. But yeah, it's like part of an overall pattern to just sort of like isolate her and to make her uh, doubt her own sanity. Yeah.
I keep
Yeah.
returning to the jewel thing because like it feels like such a like this is such a Machiavellian like giant scheme, and then it's just like
Cartoonish.
I'm doing it to steal jewels and
Right.
like
And
Yeah.
also like to get into like the ending and like the all of the plot details of the movie, right? He seduces her in like his like music school or like when she's in music school because he knows that she lives in this apartment that has jewels in it. So then they move into the apartment, but then he doesn't even go into the attic through the apartment. He has to leave the apartment and climb up like over a roof through a different building to get into the attic anyway. So I'm like, why couldn't he have just gone to London, break into the attic and find the jewels? Why this
oh
entire
my
elaborate
god,
scheme?
oh my
That
god,
is a great question. That is a very good question.
oh no, did you just cinema sin destroy this movie?
I may have. But I mean, the answer is because then the movie wouldn't happen. But yeah, it does seem like maybe a little bit too much of an elaborate plot for him to steal jewels. I also think the other thing that I think is kind of funny about that is going into the movie, and I think the way that I usually think of like gaslighting and sort of other types of psychological manipulation are about like control, like controlling someone, and sort of that's not really what this movie is about. Like it's kind of incidental. Like it's funny that like gaslighting happens especially like in like romantic pairings. It's very bad. Don't do it. But I think it's funny that it's like the end goal of this guy is to steal jewels and not just he's not just like a creep who like wants to control his wife, which is how I feel like most people would use gaslighting. He's doing it because he wants to steal jewels, which is such a 1940s movie reason to gaslight someone. You know, it's like there's all these really intense, horrific stories of like this actually being done to people for like much pettier kind of like narcissistic reasons than jewel theft. So and just the fact that that's where this movie goes, it ends in this place. It's like all of this was just because he wants money.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we have kind of found out in the way that the discourse has evolved in years past this movie and kind of used it as a reference point that a lot of people who participate in gaslighting almost do it for its own sake.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, maybe the version today would be, you know, a kind of character drama, but it wouldn't need the jewel thieving. It would just be about like
Right.
this
Yeah.
this person is manipulating someone else. Let's explore that.
But I mean, fun that it turns into a like jewel theft movie also.
I think it's fun too.
I thought one of like the most sinister things about it was that he kind of like recruited the maid as like a co-manipulator. Like I think there was even a scene in the beginning where like he like tried to turn her against the main character. Like he said something about her and then it like impacted the way that she treated her for the rest of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And like having that other person there to also doubt the reality, like that to me was just incredibly sinister.
The maid played by Angela Lansbury,
Yeah.
BT Dubs, babyface Angela Lansbury. It's like, weird to see Angela Lansbury not old.
They
or young, I guess, as most people would say.
Yeah,
Not old.
Yeah.
She turned 18 while filming this, and they paused
Wow.
for a while and gave her a birthday celebration on set.
That's wild. Yeah, I think I have only ever seen Angela Lansbury in her like 50s or later.
I've only seen her as a teapot.
Notable that she's in this movie. Yeah, playing a pretty like sinister character.
Yeah, she doesn't necessarily even have like any any particular reason to do it. I mean, I feels like that he starts kind of trying to get her on his side by like adding this kind of like sexual tension energy, that you know, maybe she is in the story like young and impressionable, and maybe also like somewhat inclined toward viciousness. And
I get this, like, I feel like it's kind of implied that he specifically sought out a like young horny woman that he could manipulate.
Yeah.
Seeking young horny mean maid.
Yeah. No, because it does seem like that he like chose her very specifically as one, like kind of as an accomplice, but also like someone that he could turn against. Ingrid Bergman, Paula is the character's name. And because then it's also like Angela Lansbury is like hitting on all the cops that are like on the beat.
That's right.
On the square, which then later on in the movie, when Joseph Cotton's detective character is like on the case, he like recruits one of the like beat cops to be like, "Hey, are you married? No, great, come with me. Like, this is your new beat, is this square." And so he gets sort of one of the constables to be sort of a honeypot to like distract the maid away.
And you say Joseph Cotton. We're continuing in our streak of Joseph Cotton movies.
100% Cotton. I'm gonna keep making that Scream 3 joke as much as humanly possible.
He was the bad guy last year, and he's the good guy this year.
Yeah, real whiplash. He's gone from best friend to murderer to detective in this.
Yeah, actually, Sarah, you have participated in the 100% Cotton Marathon because you watched Citizen Kane and Anatomy of a Fall. What is it called?
Anatomy of a Fall.
The Hitchcock one. Shadow of a
Uh,
Doubt.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't know who that is, but sure.
He was he
Cotton.
was he was the guy the murderer in Shadow of a Doubt, the evil
Okay,
uncle.
gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, like he's been great in all of these, playing very different characters each time. So, if I didn't think so already, I feel like this run of like Joseph Cotton movies has definitely been like, oh yeah, he's very good.
Yeah. One of the things that I thought was interesting as he sort of begins working on her, um, the movie, it's kind of interesting the way that the movie like depicts his strategy toward kind of breaking her down, right? Because like it begins with him just doing this like really subtle stuff to like make these scenarios where she's supposed to feel a little guilty. Uh
Mm.
and like it's not even necessarily him doing the gaslighting quite yet. He is just like trying to get her in a state where he can more easily manipulate her by giving her like a bunch of little things to make her feel like she owes him or like is indebted somehow.
Right. There's one thing that it was just like really like skin crawling in this movie is the amount of times that he like gets her to apologize to him,
Mm.
which is just like, oh, so it's so gross and awful. Where it's like he's like doing all this shitty stuff, and then he's like getting her to apologize to him for like calling him out on it.
Yeah. Something that's sticking out in my mind. I don't know if this is what you were thinking about, Chris, but I think it was towards the beginning, like he gives her the brooch and then like he puts it in her bag and they go out and then he like takes the brooch out and she thinks she lost it and it's like this sentimental item. Like I think it was supposed to have belonged
Mm.
to someone in his family or something. And then when she realizes she lost it, she feels so terrible and she's trying to hide it from him. And then eventually she tells him, she's like, "Oh, I lost this thing." And I feel like what's so sinister is that he's like, "Oh, it's okay." Like he
Yeah,
doesn't get
yeah.
mad at her.
Yeah. Well, he does get mad
He's
then. I feel like as the movie goes on, he starts to fly off the handle so easily, which
yeah,
is,
but
I
he's
guess,
just
is
like, "Oh, you
another sort of like weird psychopath, like narcissist, abusive
yeah,
behavior thing. Is just like the switch from being like really nice and calm and comforting to like furious and like really dangerous seeming is like that was kind of a thing in Shadow of a Doubt also, right? Is like, oh, he's like charming one minute and then like at the drop of a hat will get like really intense.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree. Like I think like the subtle ways that he starts off, like I think is really interesting. Like I was also pretty shocked in that moment where like he says, "Oh, it's okay," and it's like, "Oh
yeah,
no,"
yeah."
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, you shouldn't be so forgetful. Like you seem to be forgetting things more and more."
Yeah.
There's like another point where he kind of like deliberately in front of her is talking to, I forget who he's talking to, but then he's like, "Oh, your skin is so nice. You should give my wife some tips on how to have nice skin," right? And it's like all of this stuff to just like wear her down, and like it's really well written, I think, honestly, of like these
Yeah.
subtle things where it's like she isn't really able to say anything in response to it, but it just feels like subtly shitty in like a way that like it puts her in this extremely like uncomfortable, awkward position.
You mentioned the writing. This is the I guess the second movie of Gaslight. It started as a play, and then there was a British film that we didn't watch for the show because it's sort of the lesser known and I guess less well liked. I'm curious kind of now to like watch that one and see how different it is.
I would like to too, yeah.
Because like Maltese Falcon also like that was the third movie of that story, but it's like the other two are like who cares about those? Like this is the like in terms of its like place in the culture, this is like the the pinnacle of what Gaslight has like has been as a story, I guess. At least in terms of popularity. I can't speak to the quality of the play or the subtle kind of character writing in this. I think is really really good, and that's like I feel like a thing that we started to see a little bit more of going into like the 40s is like the character writing in stuff has just been dialed in. I don't know. I feel like
Hmm.
Shadow of a Doubt and this both feel like they have a really strong understanding of like very subtle human behaviors and like
Hmm.
right. They're both about these kind of like narcissistic characters, and I don't know. It's interesting to see like the writing getting pushed forward as much as like the technical other stuff.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess like maybe you could say that characters were a bit more arch before. Um,
Yeah, not always, but like I do feel like I'm noticing a trend more towards like this style of performance and this style of writing. Whereas yeah, I think in the 20s it was like Caligari stuff. I mean Caligari is a big example because that's like no movie is like that. But
unfortunately.
I know. Um but yeah, cuz I feel like I have similar thoughts to say about some of their movies that we watched for 1944 also. So I don't know. That feels like it's worth pointing out. Another thing I thought of while watching this is: are there any other movies that have like become a verb in the popular culture? There definitely aren't to the degree that this one has. Like, I think I'm willing to guess that a lot of people that use the term gaslighting don't know that it either haven't seen this movie and or also probably don't even know that it came from a movie slash play.
Yeah.
But like I think that's I don't know, that seems very notable to me that this has like had such an effect, or like the specificity of like the manipulation in this movie is just like, oh no, let's just call it the thing from the movie. Let's just refer to it as gaslighting. I think the only other thing I can think of is Gone Girling, which I feel like is still kind of more of like an internet like jokey kind of shit
Wait,
posty
what
sort
is
of.
Gone Girling?
Gone Girling is faking your own disappearance and then blaming it on your romantic partner.
Yeah, that's a little less everyday than gaslighting, I guess.
Sure, yeah, it's true. Less people are Gone Girling every day than are gaslighting, probably. But
all the girls are still here.
that is like the only other time I can think of like a movie title becoming a verb in the same way, and it's like not. No one really says that outside of like jokey like film nerd people. I feel like.
The one movie title that has a much like a very outsized cultural influence compared to the movie is the Bucket List, which was
Actually, yeah, I
a
guess that's not
term.
really a
It's
verb,
not a
but
verb,
yeah.
but it's a term that was invented for a largely forgotten mid 2000s
Right.
Rob Reiner movie,
Yeah.
and then it just became a thing that everyone says.
Right. I think
Wow.
similarly, like I think most people that say bucket list at this point aren't saying it as like a reference to the film Bucket List. It's just like a word that they know.
Yeah.
I had no
Or a
idea
term.
that was a thing. I didn't know that film existed.
Yeah.
It's
Jack
called the Bucket
Nicholson
List.
and Morgan Freeman, right?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't
And
seen
they're
the
like,
movie.
we're gonna go skydiving because we're old.
Yeah.
That's where the term came from, though?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. What? That's so confusing to me.
It's a movie from like 2007, and like honestly, I don't think that many people saw it. It's just that they explain enough of the concept in the trailer, which is how I got the meaning that it's just like, oh yeah, what's on your bucket list?
It's the premise of the movie is that they make
Yeah.
a list.
Wow.
Yeah.
One in the great pantheon of list movies.
Let's not bring up list movies again.
Again?
Towards the end of the movie, when Joseph Cotton is like in the apartment and the lights dim, and Ingrid Bergman is like, "Oh, the lights!" and then Joseph Cotton is like, "Hey, what's up with the lights that are dimming?" And she's like, "Oh, you saw it too!" And it's like
Yeah.
it's such a like a huge relief, even though like we
Yeah.
know at this point in the movie that it's like what's going on. It's still just for her to have that realization of just like, oh my god, it wasn't just me. And then she
Yeah.
like goes and like finds all the stuff that he had
Yeah.
like stolen and hidden away, and said that like there's the letter that he like locked away and was like, "Oh, you never found a letter," and she finds the letter and she's like, "Oh, it's real." It's
Yeah,
like,
Yeah.
it's like such a triumphant moment.
yeah, it's really intense, and you get to like feel her emotions with her while you're watching it.
Yeah, Ingrid Bergman, good at her job, turns out.
Yeah. And then when at the end when he's like tied up in the attic and he's like, "Oh, cut me free," and she's like, "I don't know, this knife might not exist. I'm crazy, right?
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
might be imagining this."
Like, yeah, I legitimately kind of wanted her to like stab him to death in that scene, but I get why. I think that was against the Hays Code. So
Yes, it was.
Right.
I guess one last thing about this movie is that it was a kind of puzzle piece in me finally realizing that uh when there are a lot of situations where I've heard British people say the word ma'am, and I thought they were saying the word mom.
they're saying "ma'am" like "marm."
Yeah.
Like they're like
We're really gonna
mum,
anglicize.
mum,
Mom?
hello mum.
Yeah.
And like I legitimately like thought that James Bond was calling M mom, and I was like, that's really weird, but I guess that's what they do.
But that's also like that kind of is the subtext in some of those movies. Also, it's like it's not that far off. So
And like it was only pretty recently that like it was like within the last month or two where I was like, oh, they are saying ma'am.
yeah.
Uh,
Or
and
yeah.
I was kind of slowly coming to that realization. I think this movie kind of unlocked it a little bit for me.
Yeah, very British this movie, despite not being a British production.
It's so weird that it was like a British movie, and then they're like, let's make an American remake of it, and it's just like, okay, it's
We're
also
still
in
in
England.
London.
Yeah, exactly. So
Right.
what's the point?
I do kind of get the sense like that does still happen, but I think that happens a lot less now because it is like internet movies just play internationally now, like without much
I mean, there's nothing
care,
stopping a British Gaslight movie from playing in America. This movie played in England, and they had to retitle it in order to not confuse it with the other Gaslight movie.
That is very weird, but I do think this is a good example of like the possibly ill-conceived American remake, like unnecessary American remake.
Mhm.
Even though I think this is considered the better of the two, having not seen the British one. Yeah, it is kind of like we already have one of these. Like, do we need to do it again? And like the
You
other
have
Gaslight
Gaslight
is
at
from
home.
like 1935, right? It's like not even that far. It wasn't even that old when this came out.
It might have been 38. No, the play came out in 38. The previous movie
Oh, yeah.
was 1940.
Wow, yeah. So just 4 years, and they're like, we can do it better.
I mean,
We
some of
got
the
Ingrid
Maltese Falcon
Bergman.
movies were closer. So
Yeah, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, that's true. Right, I think there was like a 34 and a 37 or something like that. Whatever. Yeah, Gaslight, pretty good movie, I thought.
Mhm. Mhm.
Real moody, real spooky. And yeah, like not surprisingly, but I think it stands out for its sort of like, I guess, like psychological intensity.
Yeah. I haven't been watching as many old movies as you guys, but I feel like the psychological angle is something that I haven't seen much until now.
Hmm. When you say it's
Yeah.
like the kind of
Like
what do you
the whole driving force of the movie, it's a psychological drama. Like that is what
yeah.
is at the center of it. And I haven't seen any other old movies like that. This is the first one.
Mhm. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I feel like there are movies that have kind of maybe similar levels of interiority, but maybe like less similar of an amount of focus on interiority.
Yeah.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
one of the notable things about Citizen Kane, I think, is like how much it is about like what is going on in the interiority of the characters.
Mm.
But it's definitely not like a psychodrama like this.
No.
I
Yeah.
also feel like a lot of psychodramas in like early film uh tend to be a little bit more, I don't know, kind of cranked up or kind of wackier. I don't know. Like I'm thinking about, like I do think Caligari
Melodramatic.
is is a like psychodrama, but it's just a like nightmare psychodrama that is, like about somnambulism and like and weird angles and stuff. Um like I kind of think of Cat People as a kind of a psychological drama also, but then it's like, what if she also turned into a panther and eat people?
I mean, doesn't that just make every movie better to have creatures in it?
If you ask me, yes, all movies should have creatures in them. But yeah, it's like a very straightforward just like psychological drama, or thriller. This is sort of like it's leaning into, I think, what a more modern understanding of what that genre is than, yeah, I think a lot of other stuff
Yeah.
that at least we've watched for the show.
Well, speaking of other things that we've watched for the show, uh,
Ah,
there's another movie involving when we kind of made the decision. I was like, oh, you should be on this episode because Gaslight, because you went to school for therapy. And then we decided that you'd watch another movie. I'd completely forgot about the kind of mental health insanity kind of angle on this movie as well, which is Arsenic and Old Lace. Uh, and it is a movie that was filmed in 1941 and then shelved for 3 years. But this is a movie about a guy who is I don't know,
good
anti.
luck with the plot synopsis on this one is gonna be wild.
Yeah.
uh, it's about a guy who is notable. A theater critic who is notable for being very anti being tied down by
Anti-marriage,
women and marriage and all of that.
like
And
marriage
then
specifically. He's like,
yeah,
men should never get married. It's a grift.
and he ends up getting married to this lady. They fall in love, and he's like, I'm gonna change everything, I'm gonna change all of my ideas. Then they are about to kind of go on their honeymoon to Niagara Falls, which is where all old-timey honeymoons go for some reason. And and this is like the, I don't know, third or fourth time this has come up. But he goes to tell his aunts, who he's very close with, who like live together in this big mansion, these nice old ladies. And while they're all packing and she's in her house across the street, or I should say across the graveyard, uh, this movie is very spooky Halloween kind of background
I
set
mean,
dressing.
set around Halloween, yeah, very Halloween themed.
He discovers that his aunts have been taking it upon themselves to mercy kill lonely old men. and uh, uh, and they are basically cheerful waspy serial killers. This is Cary Grant playing the main character, whose name is Mortimer, which is definitely a very Halloweeny name. And then it is a bunch of Cary Grant being flustered, trying to deal with his aunts who do not understand why what they're doing is wrong, and then his bad seed older brother appears, who looks like um, who who looks like
Boris Karloff.
who looks like Boris Karloff, and appears with his buddy, a plastic surgeon played by Peter Lorre. They also have another brother who is who thinks that he's Teddy Roosevelt, and everyone plays along. Mental illness kind of runs in the family, and a bunch of things, a bunch of chaos unfolds.
Hijinks ensue.
Hijinks then ensue.
So many hijinks.
Arsenic and Old Lace. How did everybody like this one?
I thought it was delightful. I loved it. I think it might be one of my favorite old movies that I've watched.
Nice.
I mean, I've seen a lot of old movies. It is also one of my favorite it's just one of my favorite movies, I think. Just
So good.
Stop. I had seen it multiple times before this, and yeah, it is just, it's like, as per the Halloween theme, it's just candy. It's just like just it's so just like fun and goopy and like
Yeah.
it's so
And
silly.
ridiculous. It's so
Yeah.
like when I was first watching it, like he discovers the body in the window seat, and like, of course, like your mind is like, okay, there's like a visibly crazy person living in this house, like maybe it was him. And then like he goes to his aunts about it, and they're like, "Oh no, that was us. It's fine." And you're just like how are they speaking so casually about this? Like throughout the whole movie, they're just like, "Oh, we can't lie. We're Christians. Like, yes, we killed that man. It's fine."
Yeah. There is like so much comedy that comes out of like how sweet and adorable the two aunts are. Like they're so genuinely sweet and caring,
Yeah.
and they just do not see what's wrong with. They're like, oh no, they're all lonely and sad. Like,
Yeah.
come on, like they're at peace now. Like we buried them down in the cellar. Like it's
We
fine.
sent
Like
them
what's
to
the
Panama.
problem? Yeah, right.
Right,
Because
yes,
Teddy, the brother, thinks that the basement is Panama, and so he's digging
Yeah.
locks for the canal whenever he's
Yes.
digging a grave.
right, and then they've tricked they I think one of the interesting things about this movie is how nicely everyone treats the brother who just fully believes that he's Teddy Roosevelt. They talk to him, they say they call him Teddy. People aren't like typically like kind of making fun of him, they just kind of accept it. But like part
Hmm.
of that acceptance is sort of using him in order to say
Yeah.
like someone died of yellow fever, like, and he's like, oh no, not
Yeah.
another one. And so
We've never had yellow fever in the window seat before.
That was a good line.
But it's also like he believes he's Teddy Roosevelt, but in a way that is like he talks about how it's like, oh, I haven't met you yet. Like it's not time in like Teddy Roosevelt's life for this to happen yet. Like he knows all the facts about Teddy Roosevelt's life,
Yeah.
but then also still believes himself to be Teddy Roosevelt.
it's great
Like,
comedy
yeah.
writing.
Yeah.
You were talking about like how well the old ladies play the characters, and there were a lot of aspects of the kind of production of this movie that were influenced by the existence of the play that it was based on. What I mentioned earlier, that it was filmed in 1941 and they didn't release it until 1944 because they had in their contract that it couldn't be released until the play was done on Broadway. And so they just filmed it
Oh.
and then just sat on it for a couple years.
Interesting.
Insane.
And the old ladies, so the two old ladies and Teddy were part of the original cast of the play.
Mhm.
But they didn't want to take all of the original actors out of the play. And so they left Boris Karloff in the play. So Boris Karloff like stayed on Broadway while they were filming this, but that role that was like, you look like Boris Karloff, it was originally actually Boris Karloff on
Yeah,
stage.
yeah. Which is like
Wow.
when I learned that, I was like, oh, that would be
So
so much
fun.
funnier if it
Yeah.
was like everyone's like, this guy looks like Boris Karloff, and it just is Boris Karloff.
There's a lot of
I
really
do
meta
think-
stuff in this too.
Do you think it still kind of works that they got a different actor? What's his name? Raymond Massey, and kind of give him prosthetics to make him look more like Boris Karloff. And it's like the whole backstory is that he's supposed to have had plastic surgery, like bad plastic surgery, by Dr. Einstein, Peter Lorre's character, and Peter Lorre had watched Frankenstein and gotten drunk, and then sort of created a Frankenstein monster face for this guy. And he's got like big scars, like the kind of classic like kids makeup, like the line with like the little like thread lines through it. So like I think it still works that he's a guy that kind of looks like Boris Karloff but isn't actually him. Like it loses the kind of meta quality, I guess, that the play had, but
But then there's like the whole thing of
What are you gonna do?
the main character being a theater critic, and like them talking about like,
Mm,
oh, this is the
mhm.
moment in the play where this would happen,
Right, which
And
I do think still works. But yeah, I guess it's right. It's not quite as meta.
it would have been incredibly meta comedy on the stage. I
Yeah,
kind of wonder
yeah.
like maybe they could have like changed certain details to make it
He was
so
a
it's like
film
he's
critic,
like, yeah, he's a movie critic or something like that.
right? The cop wants to be a screenwriter, not a playwright. It's true. Yeah, they probably could have changed that, but I guess they we're like, the play works, let's not change anything.
Yeah.
It's my understanding that they changed very little from the play. I mean, like this almost the whole movie takes place in a single set, also. But
Yeah.
there's enough like camera stuff, there's enough like lighting changes and things that it doesn't feel that claustrophobic or contained. Like it feels, even though the whole movie takes place in like a living room, it's like it feels like it has lots of energy and there's like different places to go, and it's just yeah.
I mean, energy is the word. This movie is like at 100, like the
Yeah.
entire time.
Also, this is like you said, Cary Grant is like making a lot of, he's doing a lot of flabbergasted or like flustered Cary Grant stuff. This is like peak flustered Cary Grant, I feel like.
Yeah.
To the point where he is like actively going insane on camera. Like
Yeah, it's
just
cartoony.
his eyeballs look like they're about to pop
Yeah,
out of his face.
exactly. Yeah, they do.
Yeah, it's kind of like it feels like a continuation of the bringing up baby version of him.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's like this movie is chaos at a lot of points, but like when I finished bringing up baby, I felt exhausted. But like with this one, I think it like it rides a really good line where where you're watching all of this chaos happening, but it's just shy of overwhelming.
It's very controlled. Like even though there's a lot happening usually at the same time, especially like towards the end, it does feel like it's able to really cleanly kind of focus in on individual things. Like there's like a huge there's like the bit where like the cops come in and they're fighting with Jonathan, the older brother, but that's like mostly off screen and the camera's staying on Cary Grant as Mortimer, like on the phone and things like that, and he's like looking over his shoulder and like saying stuff, and then like a chair will fly into frame and smash against the wall. Like it's I think it is able to kind of kind of find these like little points of view amid the chaos that keeps it from feeling too overwhelming. And yeah, there's just like a lot of like one character will exit and like more characters will immediately enter in, and it's like always in funny ways. This is definitely a movie that I feel like is
It's
like
tight. It's really tight.
It never like misses a chance to make a joke. Like if there's a funny way for a character to enter a scene, it's gonna be funny. If there's a funny way for like
if there's a funny
literally
way for
anything to happen.
If Teddy ever exits a scene, he is screaming.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And then it's very like I really appreciate a comedy that is like, no, we're going to layer so many jokes in that like you'll miss stuff, like you'll be laughing over jokes. There's nothing, I feel like there's very little that I think is like worse in a movie than I have seen this happen more recently, where like they will put in pauses like in the dialogue for laughs, and if that doesn't happen, it is the most awkward,
Oh no,
horrible decision. It's like that happens in like some more recent Marvel movies. They'll be like, oh, here's Matt Murdock, whatever. Like, let's take a moment, take a beat for everyone to cheer. But if no one cheers, it's just this weird, awkward pause where everyone's staring at each other in a room, not talking. And it's whoever's editing those movies needs to cut that shit out. But
it's like those
anyway.
It's like those edits of the people do of sitcoms where they take the laugh track out, and you realize like how much people are just staring at each other waiting for the laughs to end.
Yeah, no one's waiting in this movie. Everyone's moving. There's a lot of energy, which is great. I mean, Peter Lorre is my favorite character in this movie. This is I don't know if this might be my favorite movie that Peter Lorre is in. It might not be, because I think M is incredible. I think Maltese Falcon is incredible. This is definitely, without question, my favorite Peter Lorre performance.
He's really he's having a good time.
He's never been more Peter Lorre than he is in this movie. Like, he's simultaneously like creepy and off-putting, and also so funny and so silly, and like kind of sympathetic and kind of like adorable.
It's like he can't, he's a bad person, but he's not as bad as the guy who is dragging him around, who is
Cl-
trying to be the
yeah.
worst guy. It's his goal to become the worst
He's
guy.
like the I feel like a lot of like animated movies, like Disney movies, have like taken this archetype of like he's like the put upon villain sidekick who's like, no, come on, like let's just go home. Like, no, Johnny, we don't need to, no, Johnny, we don't need to kill him. We just need to get the body down to Panama. Another thing I love, everyone calls the basement Panama. Like, not just Teddy. Like, once everyone learns that that's their like rule of like, oh no, we call the basement Panama because Teddy. Everyone, including Dr. Einstein, he's like, oh no, Johnny, first you get the body, then we bring him down to Panama. And it's like Teddy's not in the room. He's like up in a separate floor. Just like that detail is so funny. Like every time he says it, it's funny just because it's like he doesn't need to do that. But oh yeah, so many good. Like I feel like everything Peter Lorre says in this movie is just gold. I could talk about like Dr. Einstein for hours probably, but I'll restrain myself. He has a really great exit from the movie, like because Johnny's kind of like the main villain. He has to get his comeuppance. Somehow they made it through the Hays Code by having Dr. Einstein technically be a villain, but he like gets away at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And he has this like look. He just makes a sound like a exasperated, like relieved sound. He just goes ah! And like runs out of the room. It's so good. I feel like I've been talking a lot. Does anyone else have thoughts?
Well, I was gonna say I just loved when a second body became involved. Like I was not expecting that at all, and then like, oh, now there's two bodies, and like the one that people expect to be there is not there anymore. Now it's another body, and it was just like it like amped up the zaniness to a whole other
Right.
level.
It lets Cary Grant like mug some more when like they
Right.
look in
So
the
much
window
mugging.
seat and
Yeah.
he expects it to be like the same body he's used to, and then there's another one.
Yeah.
Right. It's like
So good.
I think
escalates so well.
He like looks at the
Yeah.
camera and says, "Ye gods, there's another one."
And somehow this movie gets away with things like that, where it's like, right, basically, like I think he does look directly at the camera in that scene,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think that might not even be the only time that happens in this movie, and yet I'm fine with it.
This is like also it feels so out of left field for Frank Capra. Like I am so used to the standard Frank Capra movie. It's doing its thing. It's American, it's preachy, it's it's about simple guys in their small town values. And this movie is like darker and more anarchic and more comedy forward than anything that we like. He established such a vibe for himself that it feels kind of shocking that this is a movie of his. And then pretty soon after this he does It's a Wonderful Life, and kind of back to standard Capra, right?
The ultimate Capra movie.
Yeah.
I mean, that probably comes a lot from the writing, right? The writing is I think a lot darker and a lot more kind of zany, I guess, than his other stuff. It does, like, Frank Capra, as we know, he loves an eccentric household.
Yes.
He loves to show us a living room full of like people playing instruments and like everyone's quirky.
Yeah.
And this movie
The aforementioned quirky
follows
grandpa.
that very much. Like this is kind of like You Can't Take It With You kind of feels like the ultimate maybe quirky household movie, whereas this comes pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another thing is like I do like how the movie doesn't feel like judgmental, I guess, towards like Teddy or the ants so much.
Yeah.
Like you don't feel like they're bad people, or that like
No.
the movie never feels like, oh, Teddy is like has a problem. It's kind of like, no, Teddy is like happy believing
He's
that
doing
he's
his
Teddy
thing.
Roosevelt, and
Yeah.
and everyone else is also fine. Like, yeah, he blows his bugle at like the middle of the night, and he has to yell charge every time he goes up the stairs. But like otherwise, he's like a pretty well adjusted dude.
Yeah, and like it's almost there's a moment where the whole movie is basically Mortimer trying to get a handle on the situation and stop his aunts from killing people and to stop to like not get them caught by the police, right? And he kind of realizes that it is sort of expedient to blame his obviously insane brother on the killings. Oh, it was Teddy Roosevelt who did it, you know, and everyone would believe him because this guy thinks he's Teddy Roosevelt. But it feels in the movie like this kind of moral transgression from the main. I mean, it is a moral transgression from the main character, but it's like it's this moment where he's delving into something that is like pretty obviously wrong, right? Where it almost feels like the movie judges him more harshly than the ants for killing people. Uh, it's he doesn't part like because he is looking at the system of insanity from the outside and judging it rather than just participating in his own personal insanity. Uh, the movie also like kind of lets him get away. Like the one of the kind of final moments of the movie is them kind of realizing that like, you know, severe mental illness runs in the family where like the brother wants to be the most evil man alive, the other brother wants to like thinks he's Teddy Roosevelt, and the two aunts are serial killers, right? And then he finds out that the reason why he's not like that is that he's adopted.
Yeah. I'm not a Brewster, I'm the son of a sea cook. He's so happy that he's the son of a sea cook. There's the bit, I think we might have mentioned this a little earlier, where Mortimer is like talking to Dr. Einstein. He's like, I saw a play where this guy, he knows he's in the house with murderers, but does he go? No, he stays. He just sits down and waits to get tied up. And there's a guy sneaking up behind him, but does he look behind him? No, he doesn't. And then it's like Jonathan is actually sneaking up behind him. Great bit. I'm sure that killed on stage. It still kills in the movie. It reminded me a lot of, there's a bit in the second Scream reference of this episode. In the first Scream movie where Jamie Kennedy is like watching the first Halloween movie and he's going, Jamie, behind you, Jamie, look out behind you. And there's like ghost faces sneaking up behind him. And it's just like, it's a great meta doofy joke. I mean, Scream is like all about meta jokes. That one was like, I see you. Not this saying that like they took it from this movie, but like it's a very similar kind of gag, I guess.
This is the Scream of hiding a dead body movies.
Sure, yeah.
This was my elevator pitch for the movie, is that it's a comedy about hiding a dead body, and that's gonna sell anybody on it, I think.
Yeah. But then even like, yeah, like it is very wacky and zany, but like when Jonathan does tie him up and is about to like kill him in some horrific way, it's like genuinely very threatening, and like there's a real sense of like stakes, and that like something awful is gonna happen. Like it I feel like the movie rides that like dark but silly tone really, really well.
Yeah.
A few people almost drink poison too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, just the almost drinking poison
moment.
joke.
Yeah.
I mean, that's evergreen. I feel like any movie that has like poison is in this cup, and then you see people continually almost drink from the cup.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sometimes that is like, please don't drink from the cup, and sometimes that scene is please drink from the cup and you're not, you know.
Either way, it's tense and funny.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah. I know, Sarah, do you have any psychological insights into this movie? Do you feel like its portrayal of like
our
dissociative identity is accurate or inaccurate? I have a sense it's probably inaccurate, but
I mean, it seems to me like probably if I were to diagnose Teddy, he probably has schizophrenia. Like it's a delusion that he's operating under. And it makes schizophrenia look very fun. So not accurate. I don't really see much clinical distress in him. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a fun approach to mental illness, like it makes it comical. Like the fact that the ants are just like, yeah, this is normal. We just kill people and it's fine. That's probably all I have for psychological insights, but I will say like the one complaint that I have about this movie is I wish that the wife was in it more, because I thought she was so adorable, and like I loved her like Brooklyn accent. I thought she was like she had such a good presence, and I was disappointed that she wasn't in the movie much.
Yeah. I mean, like it's um there's like a bunch of characters that are sort of in the sidelines, and part of the joke, I guess, is that they are not in the main area. Like she kind of becomes
Yeah.
that way where he doesn't want her to find out about everything going on, and so he keeps like, there's this comedy of they're this new couple in love, and he's just like, get the hell out of here. um,
Yeah.
but then like
Yeah.
there's also this like recurring bit of the taxi driver who is trying to take them. They're trying to take a taxi all the way from Brooklyn to Niagara Falls. uh that's
Insane.
that's gonna be pretty rough. But there's this taxi
Yeah.
driver, the meter's running the whole time, and you keep like checking in on him throughout the movie. uh
Another great joke that I feel like has been repeated in other things is that it keeps coming back to the taxi driver being like, the meter is still running. That's a joke in Airplane, right? Where like
yeah,
there's a taxi.
I think with a taxi, that is the joke in Airplane.
Yeah.
uh but yeah, you were talking about like her Brooklyn accent, and like I think that the New Yorkiness of this movie is kind of fun.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out where the house is supposed to be, because you can see the Brooklyn Bridge. Like from, I think it's supposed to be like, I don't know, like Vinegar Hill ish area, maybe. I don't think it's like I mean, it's clearly a set, but I was trying to kind of like locate where it would be in real geography.
Yeah, as the Brooklyn hipster, give us the local angle.
Local angle is, I think it's supposed to be in Vinegar Hill, but I also think it's just like they put up a backdrop of the Brooklyn Bridge to be like, Brooklyn, you get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether or not it makes any sense.
The movie also, like, I feel like a quite delightful thing that this movie starts out with is just this, like, I don't know, indictment of like
Of Brooklyn.
yeah, it's like this uncivilized land
Yeah.
across the bridge where people are feeding all the time.
Meanwhile, in Brooklyn.
Hell yeah. I mean, you mentioned Brooklyn accents. There are some primo Brooklyn accents in this movie. Like there's like the police lieutenant who shows up towards the end has like he's like, it's just like the most 1940s guy that could exist, you know?
There's a lot of we're facing a lot of competition in this podcast for most 1940s guy.
I know. Yeah, there's quite a few of them, aren't there? Oh, I do want to quick shout out to recurring great character actor
Edward Everett Horton.
Yeah. Always, I think this was probably the first thing I saw him in, like looking back.
Our favorite fuddy-duddy.
Has become like one of my favorite actors.
Who is that?
He doesn't get to chew up the scenery in this as much as he does in other stuff.
Very
but
true.
He is the guy who runs the asylum in this movie. But you have seen him in Design for Living. He was the the dud other guy who she was like who she married for a little while, and everyone was like, we all agree that this guy sucks. Like,
Gotcha.
He's so good at playing that. I mean, he's not like annoying in this movie, but he is like so good at playing that like stuffy rich guy that everyone else is like, shut up, get out of here. I think I was probably one of the only people in decades to be excited to see his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame when I was there several weeks ago. I was like, oh my god, Edward Horton, I gotta take a picture.
I think I don't remember if I told this story on the podcast already. I might have, but the last time that me and Sarah went to LA, we went on the Warner Brothers studio tour, and I chose, they have a couple of different tours that you can do, and I chose the one for like the classic films, right? They have the classic films tour, and they have the kind of, they've got like one that's like oriented toward like DC superheroes and the show Friends, which is what all the normal people want to go. And literally
all the normies.
Literally 7 times Like, they were like, "Are you sure that you want to be on the old tour for old people?" Like,
And people said no, we're not. Like it was when we were in that room, we were all sitting down, like, this is the classics tour. Are you sure you want to be here? And like 5 people got up.
Yeah. They're
Wow.
like, if you go to the other room if you want the
Yeah.
tour that's not for nerds.
If you want to see Friends, if
Yeah.
you want the
Yeah.
Friends tour, go
They showed us
there.
Friends anyway.
Ugh. All that, and you can't even get away from it.
No,
Yeah.
it was kind of incredible and also vaguely insulting as a newly minted old movie guy, that like they're just like, nobody wants to see this stuff. I don't know why you're on this tour.
That's wild. It seems weird that they would actively discourage people from taking that tour, but whatever. I would. That's also the tour I would want to go on. Like,
Yeah.
when I went on the Paramount tour last year, I was like, no, show me all the old stuff. I love old stuff.
Like old stuff.
Yeah. Exactly.
Fun time. This was one of my first old movies, honestly. Like, speaking of old stuff, like when you and me watched this when we were like 16 or something like that.
Yeah, it's like you watched this at my house, right?
Yeah.
back in the day.
And like, this was probably one of the oldest movies that I had seen, and like, probably I would probably say this is the first like black and white movie that I loved.
Yeah, I mean, I King Kong is probably that for me, but like, this is up there. This might be like the second black and white movie I love. I don't know. Like, I have thoroughly loved this movie since I saw it. Yeah, when I was, I don't know, in my early teens.
Yeah.
And if anything, I've only grown to appreciate it more. It really holds up. I think this is a very good movie if you want to like, if you like old movies and you want to introduce people to how good old movies can be. And people are like, oh, it's black and white. Oh, it's not gonna be good. Oh, it's old. Bleh. If people are being shitty about it, show them this movie. And like, if they don't like this movie, I don't know what to show them. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like this is like a pretty, like, accessible, delightful movie.
Definitely.
Sarah, do you have any closing thoughts? Anything else to say about these two movies?
I feel like I should, but I kind of don't.
That's okay too.
Okay.
Well, thanks for joining. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being for keeping your voice down when I'm recording podcasts in the other room.
Sure. And for removing the cat collars so there isn't constant jingling in the background.
Yes.
Oh, you know what? As someone who has edited a lot of these, thank you.
You're
That
welcome.
is a lifesaver.
Yeah. Do you wanna leave us with anything? Any
Right, plugs.
Feels like a leading question. No, I just play The Binding of Isaac and smoke weed. I don't have anything.
Great. I mean, two things that I think could use an endorsement.
I endorse weed and I endorse The Binding of Isaac. And I also have a currently defunct YouTube channel called Culture Kaleidoscope. So if you want to watch like 6 videos about various things, you can look up my YouTube channel.
There's some good videos, including some about media.
I'll start it back up eventually, but
we'll
now
put a
it's...
link in the description.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we'll give you that. We'll give you that 1 week, 1 year bump.
That's right. Our 30 listeners can migrate over.
Well, thank you. Thanks for joining.
Another movie involving mysteries and murder and psychology and such. Let's talk about Laura, directed by Otto Preminger.
Who killed Laura?
Right, which I thought of every single time they say that in this movie, which is very frequently.
It's like, this synopsis is going to have full spoilers, by the way.
Yeah.
And there's good things that develop in this movie.
Yeah.
So
we don't normally do any spoiler warnings, but I think this movie warrants one just because it it is such a twisty turny movie, and
Yeah.
because it's really well written, and it's really great to like experience this movie blind.
So skip to the next chapter if you don't want to hear about it. It's a really cool movie. This movie is about it begins with a death, or it doesn't even show it. Someone has just been killed. Someone named Laura has just been killed, and
Hmm.
we're
Laura
following
Hunt.
the detective as he tries to interview all of the people who knew her and suss out what happened, who the killer might be. And he kind of interviews all of these strange characters, and they end up kind of following him like ducklings from place to place. And it allows their kind of strange personalities to bounce off of each other, and for more tensions to erupt. He's investigating the case. Suddenly, while he's in her apartment, staring at a photo of her, waiting for an answer in the case to come to him, Laura herself walks through the door, and he's like, "What the heck?" He says, "What the heck is that?"
What the hell?
So then basically what happens is he says, "Well, if you're here, then who's the dead body?" And and then
And still, who murdered the other person?
exactly. And so now Laura herself becomes a suspect in her own murder. In the middle of this, the speaking of fuddy duddies, the kind of older gentleman who has an obsession with her implies that as the cop has been investigating this case, that he's falling in love with the memory of Laura, that she is that he loves a corpse, and and eventually, he has to navigate the fact that he has feelings for her, and that he is investigating her and trying to figure out whether she did it, who did what. There's a lot of kind of complicated back and forth, uh and it eventually ends with a showdown, with a hidden shotgun inside
Hmm.
inside of a piece of furniture. There's my synopsis.
That's the plot. Pretty good movie, I think. Um,
Yeah.
it's not. I think maybe compared to probably the next movie we're going to talk about, it's maybe not the most film noir movie that like has ever been made, but it's got a lot of really great like film noir staples and sort of like imagery, and but it also I think it kind of stands apart from a lot of other noir movies for its I don't know, it's kind of
It's lighter, I think.
it's lighter, but there's I don't know, there's kind of just this like romantic mystery tone to this movie that I really
Mm-hmm.
enjoy.
Yeah.
Um
It's got a bit of maybe Rebecca in it.
yeah, I like this more than Rebecca,
Yeah,
I
definitely,
think.
definitely.
Also, the first time I saw this, which was a couple years ago, I did not know the twist that Laura is not in fact dead. And so when she walks back in, I was genuinely like shocked. I was like, "Holy shit, what is this movie even about now?"
It's an incredible moment, honestly. Like when she walks through the door.
Was this the first time you had seen it?
I have seen it before. I saw it maybe
Okay.
7, 8 years ago, but I have a really terrible memory for movie plots, and so I kind of thought that might be the case, but I didn't remember it, so it was almost as much of a shock to me when I watched it again this time. Uh, and yeah, it's an incredible moment. Sorry, I just spoiled it, but I don't know. We're talking about the movies here. Uh,
Yeah.
it's
This is maybe one of the only times I've been like, ah, people should really like be able to experience that twist, you know.
That moment is incredible. It's like it's so striking, right? Of like
Mhm.
he's staring at her painting on
Her
the wall,
portrait. Yeah.
and then like the spitting image walks through the door, which very noir kind of moment, I think.
Yeah. And it even almost like I remember I think the first time I saw it I was like, is this like a dream sequence because he's like alone in the apartment by himself, he's like drinking,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden she walks in. It's like, "Whoa, is this really happening?" But then like very quickly it's like, "Nope, like this this is for real. Like it doesn't really ever play with that.
But one of the atypical things I was saying about this movie is that it is pretty light. Like there are parts of it that are quite light. Like there, now I'm not remembering the name of the guy, the fuddy duddy in this movie,
Waldo Lydecker,
Waldo Lydecker, which is a great.
played by Clifton Webb.
So
the names in this movie are great. They're great, like noir names. Waldo
Yeah.
Lydecker, Shelby Carpenter, Detective Mark McPherson. They're good uns.
so like he is this kind of older society man who has a well-regarded column and radio show, and uh, he kind of ends up taking a shining to Laura, which ends up having this possessive energy that eventually you kind of realize that he's like the weird one, like from the get-go. And so this movie does sort of end with like, yep, it's the weird guy that did it.
Right. And it's almost like the movie so quickly establishes that he's like kind of the weird guy at the beginning, in a way where you're like, well, it'd be really obvious if he's the murderer. That's, I don't know, there's multiple characters in this that are sort of like, well, obviously he's the murderer.
Right. Yeah, like I mean, if you have Vincent Price in a movie, he's gonna have a threatening energy.
Yeah. We had babyface Angela Lansbury, and now we got babyface Vincent Price in this movie.
Yeah. This movie is almost kind of in two halves, where it kind of becomes like, once Laura comes back, I think it becomes a more earnest, hard-boiled noir drama. But then there's a lot of comedy in the beginning, in the first part of the movie, and a lot of the comedy comes from Waldo being this just strange bitchy guy like who like he cannot resist like putting down everyone around him in quite inventive ways.
Like, it is funny. I wonder how much of that is like us looking back on it, of just like this 40s movie with the guy just being so incredibly bitchy to everyone. Like, it doesn't feel jokey, I guess, but it is very funny.
I don't know. I feel like it doesn't feel like wink wink jokey, but it's like the audacity of this man, as you
Right.
as you watch it. And
Well, it's like, Detective McPherson walks into the apartment and he's like, looks at the portrait and he's like, good looking dame, as noir detectives tend to do. And he's like, well, she's not a dame. She's a lovely young woman, or was. And he's like, is that how you refer to all women, as dames? How dare you, sir? He's like so offended that he would call her a dame. And then that comes back up where it's like, he's like accusing him of like, it's like, oh, was that one of your dames that you associate with? And he's like, yeah, I guess so.
well, I mean, and it speaks to where his character goes in the movie, right? Where like that is some kind of, he's this older person, she's really young. He kind of sees himself as a mentor, but also there's like a protectiveness, but then there's also like a kind of sexuality and jealousy to his actions, and a possessiveness, right? Like,
Yeah. It's more, I think it's
he-
more possessive than it is like romantic. I don't really
Yeah.
get the sense that he is like romantically like obsessed with Laura, but more so in terms of like, right, like possessing her and controlling her kind of.
Yeah, I mean, so we say that he is weird and bitchy, and like there is like a lot of a lot of gay coding in him.
Yeah.
And
From the beginning.
from the very beginning. And like I think that, this movie sidesteps that a little bit, because I think there is an aspect of his possessiveness. Like I think that you're right that the predominant aspect is possessiveness, right? But like because it is like suitors who he is trying to destroy, right? That there is this kind of like, well, you should be with me kind of thing. And then he feels this inferiority because like it's he's so much older than her that like it does not feel like it makes sense for her to be with him. Yeah, there is like this kind of villain gay coding stuff going on, which is complex, certainly, but like it does
it happens a lot in noir and a lot of like hard-boiled detective stuff. That's definitely a thing that like the writers were going through back then.
But like also just like, yes, there are problems with all of that stuff, but the stuff that he says is so funny that like I kind of
Yeah.
just have to forgive it, because like, or there is a moment, and this is why I say that there's like a comedic edge to this movie. uh it wouldn't be if not for the whip pan at the very beginning of his introduction, where
Yeah.
like, the detective walks in, he's meeting up with Waldo in his apartment, and the detective walks into the room, and then the camera whip pans over to Waldo in a marble bathtub, like sitting in a marble bathtub, facing the door, looking at him. And then he has like a typewriter above the bathtub, and it is such a ridiculous, insane image.
It's a real
It's like
a real Dalton Trumbo type.
it's a I don't fully know that reference, but it is
He's
it's
the
a
screenwriter that wrote in his bathtub.
I didn't know that he wrote in his bathtub. uh I just know that he's Cranston. But
Yeah.
but it's like a joke. It is a punchline that the camera
Yeah,
just like
for sure.
like, look at this ridiculousness on the other side of the frame.
Mhm. This movie has a lot of whip pan, or not a lot, but it has a couple whip pans in it, which don't feel they don't feel like that common for 1940s like cinematography, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe I just haven't seen enough, but like it stood out to me for sure.
Hmm.
And then yeah, like he gets out of the tub like off screen. He's like, "Here, hand me that robe." And the detective's like, "Oh, fine, here's a robe." Like there's a weird bit of kind of like I don't think he's trying to seduce the detective necessarily, but it is like there's that right at the beginning that's like, oh, okay, well, Waldo's maybe not the most heterosexual man who's ever lived.
Although later, in the scene where he's putting his robe on, it's implied that he is naked. But then, like, while he's in the bathtub, you can see just like the corner of a bathing suit that he has on. So I don't really
Right,
know.
which I think is
That
I
might
think
have.
they probably were just like I think that's more I think he in the diegesis of the movie he's supposed to be naked in the tub, but it's like they didn't shoot it that way.
We'll put that on the goof section on IMDb.
I'm sure it's already there.
So many good lines from him. The detective kind of has. I'm not really
So
sure
many like
what's.
put downs. He's so just mean to everybody.
Yeah. There's a like, and he's very pompous. This is like not a direct quote, but Laura accuses him of being self-absorbed, and he's like, in my case, self-absorption is easily justified because the best place to focus my attention is myself. It's like I'm so obviously better than everyone else. You know, and there's a part where he is, clinging on to Laura, and they're at a party, and this is like a flashback, and Laura's talking to Vincent Price's character, and like he's trying to get her away from every possible suitor, and he walks up to her and he goes, "I cannot stand these morons any longer. If you don't come with me this instant, I shall run amok."
That's a thing that I would like to just the end of that of like, man, if I don't have my coffee in the morning, I'm gonna run amok.
And there's this recurring bit of the detective like having one of those little like marble games. Like, I don't
There's a
know.
little like yeah, where you have to like get it in the hole, but you have to like kind of slide it around. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
hard to describe.
little ball bearings inside of like a plastic thing, and you've got to like make them all get into the holes. You know what this is. But
Yeah.
I really understand why that thing is in the movie. Like, why it's this recurring object, because it seems like it puts so much focus on it. But he says, "Is that something you confiscated in a raid on a kindergarten?" It's very funny.
I think it's there. I think it's there mostly that it's like McPherson has this like little quirk where he plays with this like little ball bearings game, and it like calms him down and like helps him think. And it for whatever reason just drives Lydecker crazy. He's like, "This is so dumb. Why are you playing with kids' game,
Hmm.
idiot?"
Like, it's a
He's like, he's
tactic.
very right. It's like I think it's kind of yeah. It's like it exposes how kind of pompous Lydecker is, and it also yeah is kind of McPherson is a very sort of hard-boiled type detective that he's always very kind of sedate and kind of in a very Humphrey Bogart-esque way. He feels just sort of a little bit tired and a little bit over it of just sort of like, just tell me like what's going on. Like, oh yeah, I haven't got all day. He's constantly talking like through his cigarette and drinking.
He's so sedate that I really didn't buy the romance until we were pretty far into the romance. Like when Lydecker suggests that he's falling in love with her, I'm like, on what basis? I haven't noticed this at all.
I do think if I have any made criticism of the movie, it's like I kind of wish that it had hit that stuff a little bit more.
Hmm.
That was, I think, when I first found out about this movie, that was like the plot synopsis was like a detective falls in love with a dead woman, and I was like, that sounds cool.
Yeah,
And it's like
yeah.
that's not that big of like, I wish there was a little bit more lead up, especially like before Laura shows back up, where it's like you really do feel like he is falling in love with this person who has
Yeah.
died,
I
and then
think
she shows up.
yeah, that would be so interesting. That would be like they could have gotten a lot out of that they did not.
Yeah, I watched one of the like the DVD extras points out there's like a little moment where McPherson is talking to Laura and asking her if she's going to go through with her engagement to Vincent Price. And she goes, "No, I don't think I am." And there's like the tiniest hint of a smile on his face, and he's like, "Okay, I'll see you later." And it's like you can tell he's like, "Yes, oh, that's exactly what I wanted to hear." Um, and yeah, like later in the movie, it plays a bigger role, and I do like that stuff. Like when they're in the interrogation room, and it's like he can't like hold it together.
Hmm.
I think that stuff's really cool
Yeah.
because like you can see he's like him realizing that Ledicker's right, and that he's also like, I'm very compromised in my investigation now. Like I'm not clear-headed about this in the way that I used to be.
And
Which is an interesting place for that character to be.
yeah, and luckily Laura didn't do it. So so
Right.
all
Yeah.
good there. Uh the one who did do it is the weird guy, is
Yeah.
Lydecker. And there's this kind of detail of, we're talking about Gaslight with this sort of controlling aspect, right? And like
Hmm.
in this movie, um he uses, there's a lot of like power dynamic stuff going on between them, and one way that manifests is in the gifts, the kind of lavish gifts that he gets her, including these bespoke, two of a kind grandfather clocks, that they're mirroring copies of in Lydecker's house and Laura's house, and that becomes the hiding place for the murder weapon.
Mm. And then it is the last shot of the movie is the clock that has been destroyed by Lydecker is killed in a big shootout, and his shotgun goes off and destroys the clock in Laura's house, and the like the last image of the movie is like the destroyed clock, because it is like that's like the kind of the connection between him and Laura, right? It's like also a symbol of his kind of control over her,
Mm.
and it's also then it's like it's destroyed at the end, but it's like Lydecker destroyed it himself, which
Mhm.
is very thematically whatever on point.
We should mention also that this is our first Otto Preminger movie.
Yeah, notable.
Notable director, and
Still the only one of his movies that I've seen.
same, yeah. But we certainly will be covering
Um,
some of his later movies.
Also notable, this is, I think, a rare New York City set noir. I think noirs tend to usually be set in LA. At
Hmm.
least that's the cliche. Or sort of like more like West Coast, like LA, San Francisco. There is a few New York ones. But I feel like they're more few and far between.
That's weird. I wonder why that is. I mean, I feel like New York can supply plenty of noir-y vibes.
It's true. It's often a very noir place. Speaking from experience, especially when I'm walking around in a fedora and an overcoat, just
I will say also
looking like a
in
detective.
this movie, Laura and some of these other ones, there is a lot of smoking. Like
Yeah.
there's the fedoras, there's the coats, And there's the trench coats and there's the cigarettes. And
This has maybe the best like movie trench coat I have ever seen. Like the detective's trench coat in this is like the most perfect like 40s detective trench coat
it's good.
I have ever seen on film. It's I'm like I want it so much. Most of my other notes are just good lines of dialogue, and I feel like we don't need to repeat those.
I ain't afraid of cops. I was brought up to spit whenever I saw one.
Right, Bessie, the what? Not landlady.
The maid.
Yeah, who is just hates cops, and I'm like, yeah, I'm with you there, Bessie. There's something to this movie sort of like view of like high society, where like all besides McPherson, like all the characters, I guess Laura also. Laura sort of starts off working her way up the ladder, and then through her friendship with Lydecker is like gets wildly more successful, and he like introduces her to all these like high society people. But I feel like all of these high society people are like wealthy and like glamorous, and they all seem so miserable, like including Lydecker. Like they all seem like they have just like this like rot in them, kind of.
Yeah, and there's Vincent Price's character who is a kind of in an interesting position with all of this high society stuff, and that like he is from this, you know, classically aristocratic family and has never had to work a day in his life, but their family fortune is falling apart. This motive stuff, I guess, you know, their family fortune's falling apart, and he has to get a job for the first time in his life. And then someone, the person who he asks for a job, assumes that he's joking because it's such a ridiculous idea that this pampered rich boy would need a job. I don't know exactly what it's saying. It's saying that the aristocrats are weird. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's maybe a more nuanced take that this movie has on
Yeah,
it,
my
but
brain just died for a second there.
yeah, I like the portrayal, I guess, of high society as like both glamorous and also this kind of pit of despair, I guess.
Yeah, something that I was thinking about recently, just to touch on this. I don't think this movie is really specifically about this, but I was seeing this thing recently about the kind of shift in acting that happened, you know, in maybe the 60s or something like that, which was toward a Russian, like the inventors of method acting were Russian, and there's like this Russian realism movement in acting that was sort of like proposing that like the way that someone should act in a movie is to capture reality, which they were saying was not always the way, the kind of predominant thought on this, where uh previously movies had been kind of trying to capture a heightened, like fanciful reality. You go to the movies to escape the world and see something more, see something just more than real life, not be like dragged back down into real life. And so, you know, they were talking about how pretty much all the acting that you see these days is acting that is, if it's not method, it is influenced by these same kind of Russian realist philosophies of acting. There's a part of it, right? There's the Russian at the time meant like the USSR, and there's this kind of like maybe like proletarian sort of bent to depicting reality, where I think that there is, this is just something I was kind of thinking about recently, is that a lot of these older movies feature wealthy families or wealthy people, people who have maids, and you think nothing of it, right? And
It's sort of a thing that it reminds me of like anvils and sausage links, of like a thing that only exists in old movies. It's like, does everyone have a maid in old movies?
right, but then
It
you,
seems like a much more common thing, but it's because all the characters are like insanely wealthy.
right, and you know, I think that a situation like that in a movie these days, you would consider it alienating, right?
Mhm.
It's harder to get involved and emotionally invested in the dramas of rich people than it is, the common person. And so when you're acting in a heightened way, when people go to the movies to see a kind of fanciful idea of what the world could be, or something beyond their lives, it doesn't seem necessarily off-putting to say, like, this is a movie about what is going on for royalty, or what's going on for high society. It's aspirational, right?
Mm.
um
Mhm.
and so the acting was not gesturing at reality, where this more kind of, you know uh, uh focus on the everyday person, that we have the everyday person and everyday real emotions, instead of heightened iconic emotions that we have today. um
Mm.
yeah, I don't know, just thought it was an interesting kind of paradigm situation.
Yeah. I had never I guess I didn't realize that, like, the origins of method acting and I guess the kind of like almost like the way in which like that comes out of a worldview almost of like acting shouldn't be this fanciful thing. It should be real. It should be about the common people. It should,
Yeah,
um
honestly, like, maybe I should check my sources a little bit on this Russian stuff. That connection is sort of something that I made myself, but I wouldn't be surprised if that,
but I mean
It was Russians
whether or
in the
not that's
60s,
right, whether or not that's like directly what led to like the shift in acting styles and like what that acting came out of, like I still think that's an interesting idea that it could be from that perspective, because I'd never considered it before. So one other thing about this movie, Laura, that I think warrants brief discussion is the music. This movie is monothematic in that it has one piece of music that is the whole soundtrack,
Hmm.
including like diegetic music. Like if there's like an orchestra playing, it's playing the theme. If there's a record playing, it's playing the theme. If there's like background music, it's playing the theme, but it's all different versions of it. I
That's
think the only other movie that
interesting.
I can think of that has done this is also a noir movie, The Long Goodbye.
Hmm.
Has a piece by John Williams that is like it's like you hear like if there's elevator music, it's like a version of that theme. If there's like people playing guitar, it's a version of that theme. It's like all the music in the movie is like one single theme that's like being played in different ways. That I think is I don't know, it's a cool idea. It like makes it feel like, especially if the music is kind of associated with Laura the character, it's like her kind of presence is just kind of permeating
Mm.
even when she isn't there. It's like it's kind
Hmm.
of hanging in the air almost.
That's cool.
Um and the theme was so well received that like it was people wrote lyrics to it. Like there was um Johnny Mercer wrote lyrics for it, and then it became kind of like a standard. Like people re-recorded it for years and years and years. There was like a Nat King Cole one, there's like a Frank Sinatra one. So like this movie's theme became like a big deal.
Hmm.
And I used it in the film noir movie that I directed that you were in. Because I used all just old like clips from old movie soundtracks for that.
Had
And
you seen Laura before you did that?
I had not at that point, no.
Huh.
I was just like, oh, a film noir theme. This is like a cool like jazz, you know s- slightly moody jazz piece. Great. So it's in there.
Well, let me ask you a question that may also serve as a transition here. Uh, when you had made that noir movie, what
Mm,
noir movies had you seen already
very few.
that had given you an idea of, what to do?
I had definitely seen the Maltese Falcon. I think I had also seen Out of the Past at that point. And then honestly, one of the biggest ones is the movie Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid
Oh
with
yeah.
Steve Martin, where he is edited into a bunch of old noir movies. That was kind of one of the big, because that like synthesized so many noir scenes and cliches and things like that, where I
Right.
was able to kind of use that as a little bit of a jumping off point of like, that watching that movie feels like watching 10 noir movies, you know, because it literally has scenes from 10 different noir movies in it. So I think I might have watched maybe one or two. I think I might have seen like This Gun for Hire. I had definitely seen This Gun for Hire, I think, because the sort of like assassin guy in The Package from Marrakesh is slightly inspired by that character, but is also slightly inspired by Elisha Cook's character in The Maltese Falcon. So it's sort of I was just mashing together a bunch of stuff.
So what you're saying is that you hadn't seen Double Indemnity.
I had definitely not seen Double Indemnity, our next film of the year. Despite Double Indemnity being one of the most famous and most well-regarded film noirs, and also just one of the most like noir
This
movies.
This
that
is definitely, I can definitely say that this is the noiriest movie I've ever seen.
I think like Out of the Past is probably the only other one that like gives it a run for its money that I've seen. Double Indemnity is just like soaked in like noir shit.
Yeah.
And it's great.
You want to give us a synopsis?
Sure. So as per you know, common noir thing, we start at the end of the story, and our main character, played by Fred McMurray, shows up at an office building, and he's been shot, but we don't know by who. And he goes to an office and he starts talking into a dictaphone, which I didn't know what a dictaphone was before I saw this movie. A dictaphone is a thing you can talk into and it records your voice onto a wax cylinder. And so then he starts being like, I'm going to tell you the whole story of how I got here. And then we flash back and we have his narration over the whole movie. Already, like, super, you know, super film noir cliche stuff.
Narration over the whole movie is a noir thing for sure.
Right. But notably, right, like this movie and Out of the Past, which we'll probably watch in a couple episodes, they don't just have narration for narration's sake, like it's motivated. Like, no, he's sitting in an office and he's dictating this onto a wax cylinder. That's why there's narration. It's not just there.
Diegetic.
Right. So this guy, Walter Neff is the character's name. He's an insurance salesman, and he goes to this house in Los Feliz, and to sell insurance, and the guy isn't there, but his sexy wife, named Phyllis, played by Barbara Stanwyck, is there, and they flirt, and he's like, "Hey, you want to buy some insurance?" She is like, "I don't want insurance for me, but I do want life insurance for my husband. I want I want the biggest payout possible. I also don't want to tell my husband that I'm getting life insurance for him." And he's like, "That is very suspicious."
But you're sexy as hell.
Exactly. So he's like, "You know what? I think maybe we can work something out here." And so they start plotting to murder Phyllis's husband, like trick him into like signing the papers to give himself life insurance, and then murder him in a really like unlikely way so that the payout will be double, which is where the title comes from. Double indemnity is a clause in life insurance that if they die in a really unlikely manner, then you get paid double. And so they're like, "All right, so we're gonna throw him off the back of a train," I guess is that's their plan. But then that's complicated because like he breaks his leg, so he can't take the train, and this and this. They murder him. They throw him off the back of a train. Walter Neff pretends to be him on the train, so people see him, and they're like, they cook up this whole scheme, and they're like, "We got it. This is airtight." He's like, Walter Neff's like, "I've investigated so many insurance frauds. I know where all the holes are. Like, I know what all the the pitfalls are. I can work my way around all of them." But what he doesn't count on is the fact that his boss, played by Edward G. Robinson, is just like so incredibly good at like insurance investigation that it's like this foolproof plan that he's come up with. First of all, not foolproof. No murder plan ever is. And so then, right, the back half of the movie is them like they've done this murder. They think they've gotten away with it, but then the pieces start to crumble. And then they start to mistrust each other also because they're like, they've gotten this plot together, and now they're inexorably tied to this murder, and their sort of like trust in each other starts to wear thin also.
Yeah. And so this is notable, I think, for being a movie that is about villainous characters, right? Like these.
Right. This isn't about the detective trying to solve a crime. This is about two people trying to murder someone and get away with it.
And I don't know, the movie does a decent job of the movie does a decent job of making them not like outwardly despicable in a way that it would be hard
Mhm.
for you to kind of get on board with their plan.
Yeah.
But like as a viewer, you have a bit of a bias toward the protagonist, but also you're just like, this guy kind of sucks, like, yeah, kill him.
Right. Yeah, the guy that can murder sucks. That definitely helps a lot. I think there is just this kind of morbid curiosity to this movie too, of just like what would I do in this situation? Like if I honestly wanted to try to murder someone, like how would I try to do it in like, how would I try to cover it up? How would I like what are all the little details that I would need to do? Because it really follows through with the sort of like, what do you do immediately after murdering someone? Like, do you just go
Yeah,
home?
yeah.
Like I like how much the movie focuses on that stuff also. And then I think some of the, because I think both Walter Neff and Phyllis are both like pretty bad people. Like they're not, and the movie doesn't really try to hide that.
Yeah,
But I think it helps that
they're charming.
they're both playback actors who up until this point were mostly known for like comedies. Like
Mm.
this is really against type for both of them at this point. I think after this, both Barbara Stanwyck and Fred McMurray kind of did more like dramas and more crime movies. But like, I don't know, like Barbara Stanwyck was in All About Eve and is like, I guess she's also a criminal in that movie, but is like a very different type of character.
Yeah.
Like in that she's like wacky and goofy, and in this she is like
She
like
gets scary
stone
in this
cold
movie.
murderer in this. Yeah, she is like a psychopath.
And
As revealed later on that it's like this is not her first murder plot either.
yeah, the movie chiefly follows the insurance guy,
Mhm.
Walter Neff. So the movie chiefly follows Walter Neff, and so you're kind of discovering things about the kind of background details of this woman as he is, and so
Mhm.
he kind of feels like, oh, they fell in love so quick, and yeah, we can be together and get a whole bunch of dough if we bump off your husband. um
Mhm.
and so you're discovering along with him that like she has been playing him this entire time. Femme fatale,
Yeah.
classic noir. Speaking
Again, like the most femme fatale anyone has ever been is like this movie, where like immediately she like walks into frame, and you were just like, "Yep, femme fatale. There it is."
right, like,
I
and
know.
like the Maltese Falcon, like she is tricking the main character, or at least attempting to trick the main character by
Mhm.
acting more innocent than she is, and it kind of unfolds how
Yeah.
fatale this femme is. And yeah, and so like you say, stone cold killer, like you would think as they do the murder that they are, there's a moment where he's narrating about how he was a little surprised at how not shaken she was after killing her husband.
Mhm. Well, also like the actual moment of the murder, right? It's like the husband is sitting in the passenger's front passenger seat of the car. Walter is in the back seat hiding while Phyllis drives to the train station. Walter, strangles him from the back seat while Phyllis drives. But the way that we see it in the film is just we see Walter pop up, and then it cuts to a close up of Phyllis's face as he's driving, and we just hear the murder happening
Yeah.
off screen as she stares directly ahead. Like her eyes do not move at all. Like she is just staring ahead, and there's like the faintest hint of a smile as like you hear her husband being strangled right next to her. It's like it's very chilling. Yeah, it's a great moment.
This movie and Arsenic and Old Lace, I think this must have been like a Hays Code thing, or at least something to like help it I know this movie had a lot of trouble getting through the Hays Code. Like,
This movie had a lot of trouble with the Hays Code. Yeah,
but like this movie,
unsurprisingly.
like this and Arsenic and Old Lace both are you don't get a very good view of a dead body like the entire time.
Mm.
Like for Arsenic and Old Lace being a movie about dead bodies, you don't really ever like see
You
one.
never see them. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's in the dark or they're like obscured behind somebody. It's like trying to take a bit of the grimness out of it. And yeah, in this
I
movie,
think that somewhat comes from the stage play. I'm guessing also of just like you just have people looking in a window seat and like there's a dead body in there. Like it's a very that feels like a very kind of stage play. I don't know.
well, when they were moving the dead
Mechanic.
body from the window seat to the basement and the lights were off, that was
Right.
something that I was thinking was kind of notable. It's like, oh, you
Mhm.
can't see the body right now. And yeah, in
Yeah.
this you can't see the killing. Maybe that is like a kind of censorship, pre-censorship sort of thing. Maybe it's also
Hmm.
that like you would turn on the characters too quickly if you were to watch them if you were to watch them kill someone. Yeah.
I do think it is like just purely for like if I was making this movie now, I still think that's the best way to cover that scene is to just show Phyllis's face
Yeah, that's a good move
like
anyway. Yeah.
completely unfazed. Yeah, like it's a really great moment of performance also. But there's also in the sort of especially in the back half of the movie there is the murdered husband's daughter from another marriage that is kind of the first one to really kind of put additional suspicion on Phyllis to Walter because she's like, "Oh yeah, Phyllis almost definitely murdered my mom."
There's a reason why
'Cause
I
it
don't
turns out
like this lady.
yeah, it turns out Phyllis was the nurse to the first wife, and then the first wife died mysteriously, and then Phyllis married the husband like a month later or something like that. And so it's like, yeah, mm, check that's pretty suspicious. Um and so yeah, that there and then there's like the daughter's I guess sort of like on again off again boyfriend that they're like kind of trying to pin the murder on, who's named Nino. That is I feel like there's a little bit of maybe negative Italian stereotyping going on with that character of like, ooh, he's from the streets, he's Italian, we don't like him. He has maybe my favorite line of dialogue in the whole movie though, Nino does, where Walter comes up to him, is like, here's a nickel, like go go call somebody, and he goes, keep your nickel and buy yourself an ice cream cone.
Yeah, another spotlight on the noiriness of this movie is, you're hearing this guy talk into this recorder the whole time and just saying the most hard-boiled stuff.
Oh,
Everything that he describes is the most like lyrical noir-y way that he possibly could.
I mean, this is based on a like hard-boiled crime book, and it's also the screenplay is co-written by Raymond Chandler
Mhm.
of Big Sleep fame, amongst many others. So it has like the hard-boiled dialogue is like it's so crunchy and juicy and other adjectives that words are usually not used to describe.
Don't say those words. I'm hungry. Speaking of the talent behind the camera, too, this is our first Billy Wilder movie. We had our first Otto Preminger and first Billy Wilder now.
Billy Wilder, amazing director. Like I haven't seen that many Billy Wilder movies, but like they're all great that I've seen.
Yeah, I've only
So,
seen Some Like It Hot, and I like that movie.
oddly enough, one of the few that I haven't seen, or one of the many that I haven't seen. Not to just like repeat lots of dialogue, but like there's a repeated line of dialogue in this that I think kind of sums up a lot of at least the back half of the movie. It's also just so hard boiled, where Walter says, "When you murder someone, you get on a I'm paraphrasing, but he says something along the lines of like, you get on a trolley car and you're on that car to the end of the line, and the last stop's the cemetery."
And yeah, they kind of keep returning to that metaphor through the whole movie.
Yeah, I do feel like metaphor is a big thing in like 40s like hard-boiled dialogue, and that's just such a great one. I mean, we mentioned Edward G. Robinson
Yeah,
He's so good in this movie.
he is
Like
good.
he
Yeah,
is as good as everyone is in this movie. I think he is my favorite performance overall.
he's like a little. I mean, I think his existence is a little cartoony, but
Yes, he is a cartoon man. Just his resting cartoon face, I guess.
maybe a lot of cartoons have just put his face in that cartoon, but
I think that is also true. Yeah.
this is definitely a much a much more real world version of him than we saw in Little Caesar.
Hmm. Yeah.
There's a lightness to his approach. Like he is this person who there's a great scene where he is at first he doesn't think that this crime is there's anything hinky going on. Like he the head of the insurance company gets involved with this because this double indemnity payout is going to be so expensive for them. And so I feel like there is some real like commentary about like the insurance industry too, that they're doing
Hmm.
everything that they can to not pay this
Yeah.
money.
Hmm.
uh
Yeah.
that would be a much harsher indictment if they shouldn't if it wasn't the case that they actually shouldn't have paid out the money. But
Mm.
the head of the insurance company is wanting to suggest that it was a suicide, which is convenient for him because then he wouldn't have to pay out the money. But then Edward G. Robinson's character is basically like, there is no way. Look, I know, like, I've been in this business for a long time. I've read the actuarial tables. I know everything about suicide. I know all the stats about suicide. And then he like lists off
I love how it's through stats. That's how he figures it out. He's like, no, like statistically, that doesn't make any
yeah.
sense.
And there's this incredible part where he's just listing off dozens and dozens of ways that you can kill yourself and like
Yeah.
talking about like the probability of these things relative to each
And
other.
he's like listing them on his fingers while holding a cigar. He's like, no, you got this, you got this, you got this. No, 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 no. Yeah, I love how he's like constantly has a cigar. I mean, he's great in this anyway, but I think also in comparison to Little Caesar, which is like his, one of his other really big roles, it's cool to see him play such different characters, I guess, because like Little Caesar is right, like the cartoon version of a gangster. He invented the cartoon version of a gangster in that movie. And in this, he's playing like just a wholly different type of person
Yeah.
while still having a lot of the same kind of mannerisms.
And
So it's
he's
like
like
anytime he's on screen in this, I'm just like overjoyed.
he's also like one of the more like honest, virtuous people in the movie.
Yeah. And it's like him and Walter are like good friends. Like, and it feels like they are genuinely good friends.
Yeah, they kind of say "I love you" to each other, which
Yeah.
it was just interesting for a movie.
I would argue that the love story between Keyes and Walter Neff is stronger and more heartwarming.
Yeah,
Certainly more heartwarming
yeah,
than the love story between Phyllis and Walter, because that's not really a love story. That's more of a tale of seduction and betrayal and murder. But
yeah. I mean, I think the moment that you really kind of feel their relationship with each other is in the end, where this is another case like Laura, where it is somebody Keyes is on the trail
Mhm.
of a killer. There is a bit of a compromise in a way because he doesn't want to accept that the killer could be the person that he wishes it wasn't. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so as it becomes clear that Walter is the killer, they are confronted. We arrive at the point where the narration is happening, and then continue on from there. So they're meeting in Keyes's office, and Walter is slumping away, trying to get to Mexico, and yeah, there's you can see their dynamic where he's like, I know that I should, I can't let you go, but it hurts me to watch you
Mhm.
suffering in front of me.
Yeah. Yeah, and the movie ends with right, there's a thing throughout the whole movie, right, where Keyes, Edward G. Robinson's character, keeps trying to light his cigar with a match, and he can't do it. And then Walter comes up and like really easily lights the match and lights his cigar for him with his thumb, because in the 40s you could do that. And then the last shot of the movie is right. Walter is like bleeding out on the floor. He like tries to get away and he can't. He just can't walk anymore. So he is like up against the wall and he tries to light a cigarette and he can't light it. And Keyes does the thumb trick and lights the cigarette for him. And it's like,
it all comes
what a
back
great
together.
yeah, what a great moment that is. I guess we completely flew over the confrontation between Phyllis and Walter, where like, right, Walter shows up to Phyllis's house and is like, "Hey, I know you're aiming to betray me on this," and Phyllis shoots him, and then they have sort of like a we could have been something real, and then Walter shoots her and she dies. Originally, I guess in the book, which I haven't read, it was more of either like joint suicide or like murder suicide situation. And the Hays Code wasn't cool with that. So they were like, all right, he like goes back to an office and like other stuff happens. After that, there was a deleted ending that I don't know if the footage exists anymore. There's definitely stills that I've seen of it where like the last scene of the movie was gonna be Walter going to the gas chamber to be executed.
Whoa!
For his crimes. And I think that was also kind of a Hays Code thing that like they put that on because like there was one of the Hays Code things is like you can't get away with murder. Like that's like a rule. Don't really know how Arsenic and Old Lace got away with that because like the old ladies do not. they do fully get away with lots of murder in that movie. I guess Breen wasn't watching that one too closely. But so there was that ending that they shot, I guess, and then decided like this is not like a good thing to go out on. It's much better to end in this moment between him and Keyes, which I agree with. I think that is like the perfect ending to
the ending's really great. Yeah.
Two other things I feel worth mentioning are the lighting in this movie, another like super film noir thing. So many Venetian blinds, just constant Venetian blinds. It looks great. Just lots of great just like graphic shapes on walls and like shadows, and this movie looks gorgeous. Although I think Laura won the Oscar for cinematography for 1944. Also looks great. Also very shadowy. And then the other thing that I think is kind of funny is that Barbara Stanwyck has a really bad fake-looking wig in this movie. She normally has like dark brown hair, I guess, in black and white. But in this, she has like this like platinum blonde short hair that's like looks like a very obvious wig. That apparently they initially Billy Wilder was like, "Oh no, that's great. It's like it shows that she's like insincere and that it's this like constructed person that she's made for herself." But I think the wig was so bad that they like halfway through shooting they were like, "This wig sucks. Like, can we not have it?" But they're like, "We've already shot like half the movie. We can't change it now. Like she's already had this wig the whole time." And then apparently after that, like Barbara Stanwyck was like became so much more famous after this movie. I think she was already like one of the highest paid people in Hollywood. That kind of became like her look was like the weird blonde wig, which is funny.
She will wear wigs.
Yes. Now. So yeah. I don't know if I have any other like big takes on this. It's just really good.
It's a really solid movie. It's a very, very well put together movie. We were talking about the tightness of the script in Arsenic and Old Lace as far as like a comedy script, but this is really tight. Like the twists and turns in this movie feel so natural. So there's a lot of really good tension in this movie. Like I just nail biting scenes. Like it really gets you going.
Another fun fact about this movie. There's a bit right after they have committed the murder and like thrown the dead body on the train tracks to like fake it, and Walter has done his whole sort of like impersonation on the train. They're like, all right, we've done all the things, now we just need to drive away. And they go to the car and the car won't start. And they keep trying to start the car, and eventually it starts and they drive away. And that was unscripted. Like they went to shoot that scene, or I don't know if it was unscripted when they shot it, but it was a thing where that wasn't initially the idea. But then I think while they were shooting, not necessarily while they were shooting that scene, but I think like they tried to start a car. Someone tried to start a car and it wouldn't start. And Billy Wilder was like, "Oh, light bulb! Like that's great. Like they should They should try to start the car and it doesn't start. That's so great. And so that is a fun moment of tension that was sort of added last minute. Yeah, just so many great just like things that I feel like just make are like great like movie moments where you're just like like either
Yeah.
of surprise or of just like tension where you kind of want to see Walter get away with it.
Yeah.
You're like you're with him for most of the movie. Be like, oh, how's he gonna get out of this one?
And they are resourceful at times. It's just
Yeah, yeah,
they're not sloppy, but like you were saying, there's no such thing as the perfect murder.
yeah.
Uh,
Especially not when Keys is around and all his stats.
Another movie that has some kind of tense scenes between a kind of bombshell blonde and the main
Ah,
character is To Have and Have Not, which is based on which is it was originally just directly based on, but then became looser and looserly based on an Ernest Hemingway short story. And this is Howard Hawks, and Howard Hawks and Ernest Hemingway were friends, and they were on a fishing trip together, which is very very Hemingway coded. And
yeah.
and he was
And I assume they might possibly have been partaking in some alcoholic beverages, but that might be assuming too much.
Howard Hawks is like, I could make a movie out of your worst story, which is To Have and Have Not. And what a pitch. This movie,
Yeah.
Harry and Steve are fishermen living in a hotel in Martinique who take on various boat-related odd jobs. On an eventful day, Lauren Bacall's Slim enters his life, and the hotel owner, who is supportive of the French resistance, asks for Harry's help with a secret mission. Harry really only wants to do anything for pay. He doesn't want to get involved in political stuff. Sound a little familiar? Harry, by the way, is played by Humphrey Bogart. Sound a little familiar?
Yeah.
Harry decides the heat is too high in the region to be participating in the anti-Gestapo activities. But as kind of things unfold and the tension gets higher, more related to what's going on in the hotel, Slim and Harry also get closer and they get more involved in the resistance. And he eventually agrees to carry out the mission, which is to pick up two operatives off an island and off somewhere and eventually deliver them to Devil's Island so that they can start a prison break and get the kind of resistance, the French resistance fighters up and going to defeat the
Devil's Island, where Dreyfus was held during the Dreyfus affair.
That is taking it way back to some early 1 week, 1 year episodes where we saw Devil's Island. I believe we saw Devil's Island in the Méliès the Méliès
we
version.
saw a painted backdrop that Méliès painted of Devil's Island.
Right, of course. This movie is very similar to Casablanca.
I mean, yeah, it has real sort of like off-brand Casablanca vibes. I think my letterboxd review of this movie is "We have Casablanca at home," which I think is maybe a little unfair to the movie because it is, on one hand, I do think the movie is trying to be that a little bit. I think it is very much a sort of like Casablanca worked. Let's just do that again in a different locale with like slightly different cast and like setup. Although I do think so much of what works about Casablanca, because it's so similar, because it doesn't work as well in this movie, it makes this movie feel worse.
Yeah, so here's the thing. When I saw Casablanca, I on Letterboxd, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And then when I saw this movie, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And I was like, you know what? That's not right. Like, I went back and bumped up Casablanca a little bit because I did have fun with this movie. Like, I think that
it's a Howard Hawks movie. It's fun.
This is definitely smaller in scope and like kind of less emotionally charged. It's got a bit of a lighter touch than Casablanca. But like, and it, you know, if it weren't tackling like all the same themes with some of the same
Mm.
actors, it would not be a problem. But yeah, but if you take this movie on its own, it's a fun time. It suggests lightly some of the things that Casablanca feels vigorously about, uh,
Hmm.
but also it's like, hey, there's a guy that's drunk all the time. We get some fun bits out of that. Like, there's like it focuses a lot more on like the banter between people and like the interplay with the characters. Um, I think it's like the light and fun version of Casablanca.
Yeah, it's definitely feels less like a sort of like arch drama. Like Casablanca feels almost like this epic, even though it takes place in a bar like 90% of the time. And then this also takes place like in a hotel 90% of the time, and it feels like a movie set in a hotel
Yeah, and
for the
there's
majority.
also
Like,
a guy playing piano the entire time in the middle of
yeah,
it too.
yeah, that I think especially feels like a thing that they added to make it seem more Casablanca-esque. The guy in the piano in this one is played by Hoagie Carmichael, who was a big musician at the time, and I am familiar with Hoagie Carmichael primarily because that is who, in the book Casino Royale, that is how James Bond is described, as he looks like Hoagie Carmichael.
Interesting.
Yeah, he's pretty good in this as a sort of a piano player guy. I mean, he's basically Sam from Casablanca. Like, he's not that different of a character,
Yeah.
but he gets to sing some songs. You know, he's there. I'm sure he had a fun time on set. This is how I feel about this movie. Is that I'm not like, it seemed like it was fun to make. You know.
Well, it was very fun for Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall because
Hey.
this is the movie. You know, we've heard of Bogart and Bacall, and that's where this began.
Yeah,
Humphrey
Bacall's
Bogart
first movie.
Humphrey Bogart was in a pretty unhappy marriage while he was making this movie, and apparently he was pretty traditional in Hollywood, especially in that he was like, I can't see other ladies. I'm married. He was born in 1899 and he called himself a man of the
Mm.
last century. But this movie, in the process of making this movie, he and Lauren Bacall fell in love very quickly and very forcefully, I guess. I don't know. Is that the word? Enthusiastically. Enthusiastically.
Enthusiastically, yeah.
You could see it kind of reflected in their performances.
Yeah, they're steaming up the screen anytime they're like, I like, there are a lot of movies, especially of this era, that people are just like making a lot of eyes, and it's, you know, they're trying to like make it feel as kind of sexually charged as possible without actually, you know, going against the Hays Code. I feel like this movie in particular is like one of the most famous for that. And I think it helps that the two actors are actively being like, "Oh my god, look at this person!" Like, I do feel like that the actual sexual tension is palpable on screen.
Yeah. Especially in one of its most famous lines, which I wrote this down. I did not know that it was like a famous line from this movie, but I was like,
I knew that it was
I was
famous
like,
line
holy
from this
shit!
movie.
Like, did they just say this? Where she's like, oh, you could just whistle for me if you need me, and then she's like, you know how to whistle, don't you? Don't you? She calls him Steve. She's like, you know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow. And it's like, oh my god! Like,
I feel like that's one of the main examples people use of like how movies got around the Hays Code. Is like, look at Lauren Bacall talking about blowing whistles in To Have and a Have Not. So yeah, that definitely, and it's funny because it's like the movie puts such an emphasis on it too. Like, she takes a
yeah.
long pause. It does this like dolly in on her face. And then it cuts to Humphrey Bogart being like, okay. And then he does a wolf whistle, newly minted, named wolf whistle after the wolf in Red Hat Riding Hood. I do feel like that. I mean, that scene in particular, but like throughout, they're just like, looking at each other from across the room, and you're just like, "Damn, movie, okay, I see it." That's probably the best thing about this movie is just watching them to like be horny at each other.
Yeah, and it's
For
not
most of
only
it.
horniness too. I think they have, a good dynamic. They have a good back and forth
Yeah,
in
yeah.
this movie.
They have a lot of very good banter and a lot of like each of them kind of getting like the upper hand a little bit, and each of them kind of
Yeah.
right because they're both characters that are sort of now kind of transient, like running away from stuff.
Yeah.
And they kind of see that in each other, but they're
Hello,
both very
Casablanca.
guarded at the beginning.
Hello,
Yeah,
Casablanca.
I do feel like the one thing this has over Casablanca is that it does feel like Lauren Bacall is a much more similar character to the like Humphrey Bogart type, I guess,
Right.
than Ingrid Bergman is.
I think any movie.
It feels like there's a bit more of a kind of tete-a-tete of like them being like equally kind of guarded and equally kind of like I don't know. It feels like they're a little bit more kind of like an equal footing with each other in this movie.
There's like a classic thing in movies where somebody tries to pickpocket someone, and then there's the mark, right? And then there's the two main characters, and one of the main characters notices the other one pickpocketing someone, and then like confronts them about being pickpocketed with respect at their pickpocketing skills. I don't know why that is like it's like a thing that happens in a lot of movies, but it's always great. It's like, oh,
how Matt Damon's character is introduced in Ocean's 11.
We respect each other as pickpockets. Like game recognizes game, but also I gotcha. It's like it's this nice dynamic of like, you thought you were slick, but I'm slick too, and I got the upper hand just a little bit, but also I'm welcoming you into my world of pickpocketing.
Lauren Bacall, very good in this movie. Unsurprisingly, I've seen her in other things with Humphrey Bogart also. Yeah, like for the first time she's ever been in a movie, I think it's pretty like respect. Like does a very good job, and like holds her own against a much kind of more experienced, well-established actor also. Gets to sing. That's always fun.
Yeah.
Bogey not doing a lot of singing in these movies, sadly. Although maybe it's a good thing. Maybe we don't want to hear his singing voice. I don't know.
He's got a weird a weird voice. We'll say that.
Yeah. The thing that sticks out about this that makes it feel like such a kind of downgrade from Casablanca is that Humphrey Bogart's character in that is like, so you feel like he has this like idealistic heart at his core.
Yeah.
But he has so much like scar tissue over that he's just like, no, I'm only in it for the money now.
Yeah.
And we see that kind of getting peeled away over the course of the movie. This is kind of a guy that is just a mercenary at his heart and is just kind of annoyed into helping people because he's like, I got nothing else to do. Like,
right.
It doesn't feel like he does have this turn towards the end of the movie where it's like, fine, I'll help the French resistance. But it's like, I don't know, that character feels a lot less complex and a lot less the turn towards actually helping people feels less earned and less like a victory, I guess.
Yeah, I think so much of what Casablanca is about is Humphrey Bogart getting over his jadedness in order to believe in something again. And this, it's like a bit simpler. It's a Han Solo kind of thing, right? He is a good guy, but he mainly wants money. And then he kind of is put in a situation where he has to do the right thing. And then he's just like, yeah, I'll do the right thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if we need to like rag on this movie because it's like, it's weird. It's like there's nothing.
Yeah, it's
there's
not
nothing
bad.
There's nothing bad about it. It's fun. It's good. It's just like when there's something so similar that has so much more spirit.
Right. It almost feels kind of like a sequel in that way where it's like, we just did this and it was so much better the last time that like this isn't bad, but it's just like it suffers so much in comparison.
Yeah.
Like there's kind of like off-brand Peter Lorre in this movie. There's like off-brand Sidney Greenstreet. There's like so many of kind of like similar types of characters that are just less interesting and less fun than in Casablanca. So I'm just like, oh, all right.
But this does have the addition of a fun gimmicky boozer, wino, what do they call him? Rummy.
Yes, a rummy. There you go.
There's the rummy character who brings a lot of fun to all of his scenes.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure I'm sure Hemingway had a lot of personal experiences he could draw on. I have no idea if that character's even from his story. It probably isn't.
Like Hemingway, as we were talking about, a lot of Hemingway vibes in this. The
Mm.
being fishing, but also like
Yeah.
the first shot that you see inside of inside of, oh god, what's his name, inside of Harry's room, there's a bunch of pictures of like muscly boxing men on the walls. It's like
Very, very,
there's
very
just like
Hemingway.
very masculine stuff
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah. It is also weird. So Humphrey Bogart's character's name is Harry, but people call him Steve as like a
Yes.
nickname. Why that is, I don't know. I mean, I know
It's
kind of the behind the
because,
scenes reasons why, but within the world of the film, I don't know why.
right, yeah, I think it's probably just because she is trying to mess with him because she told him not to call her Slim, and then he did, and so she's just calling him something else also.
Mm,
One kind of
right.
side behind the scenes thing is that like the rights to the original story were sold for some reason to Hughes Tool Company.
Drill bits.
Yeah. So a tool company owned the rights to the book. Then Howard Hawks bought the rights from them and then sold them to Warner Brothers.
Hmm.
So because Howard Hawks made a whole bunch more money selling the film rights to Warner Brothers than Hemingway made selling the book rights to the Tool Company, that Hemingway was mad and didn't speak to Hawks for 3 months.
Oh wow. I mean, I have to assume that it was bought by Hughes Tools, basically because Howard Hughes wanted the rights to it, maybe to make a movie. I don't know.
Oh, like oh wait, Hughes Tool Company is Howard Hughes Tool Company.
I'm assuming so. That's why I made my very astute drill bits joke.
An American manufacturer of drill bits, Howard
Drill
Hughes.
bits.
Okay, all right. Well, that makes some more sense then.
I'm about this story. I'm gonna make a film out of it, not make more drill bits. Show me all the blueprints. Show me all the blueprints. Show me the blueprints.
Wow, we watched this movie just recently, and yet I can't remember. Well, there is a bar they go into called Bar du Zombie, which is very
Great.
cool.
Great.
I want there
I
to
want to
be a
go there.
I want there to be like a Haitian voodoo bar called Bar du Zombie. It would be incredible.
There's a tiki bar in Brooklyn that I've gone to multiple times called the Zombie Hut, which is great. It's like absurdly affordable. The drinks are big and very good. Like,
Absurdly affordable is big for that's like a big deal for a tiki bar. Those are typically not
right. It's
affordable.
I don't associate them together, and this is like you can get like a big drink full of rum for like not that much money. Especially like for Brooklyn too. These it's like not.
It's like only $18 for a cocktail.
No, I'm saying it's like $8 for a cocktail, which is
Wow.
like crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy anywhere these days.
Yeah.
Unless it's a really divey place and it's like a well, it's like a rum and coke at the well.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, not to make this whole conversation about the zombie hut, but it's like it's got good atmosphere. They have a huge backyard. It's a good spot.
The first 1 week, 1 year fan meetup at the Zombie Hut.
You know what? Yeah, get in the comments. We'll make it happen. I love the zombie hut. Shout out to the zombie hut.
I'm just trying to like think of some other kind of random stuff going on. This has like a vaguely, anti-fascist kind of thing going on, like
Mhm.
Casablanca. I think that the guy that they rescue, who's part of the French resistance, um, they're he's talking about doing his duty, doing his mission, and like what if he dies? And then he says, that is the mistake Germans always make with the people they try to destroy. There will always be someone else. And that's inspiring. That's good,
Yeah, yeah. Much like watching Casablanca, I was very into this movie's overall anti-fascist kind of messaging. Always up for some of that. And yeah, that I think that moment where he says that is like one of the few that like really kind of rang true for me, where I was like, oh, this is a good moment.
Yeah.
Also on the boat, there's a big kind of fishing chair rig that is just like the one in Jaws. So that I
Yeah.
thought that was fun.
Yeah.
there are definitely like highlights in this movie, and I think this movie is worth watching and is a lot of fun. But it definitely, I don't know.
You know what it
I
is?
wasn't that crazy about it.
Casablanca is a movie you sit down and watch, and this is a movie that you throw on, and it's a good
Yeah,
time.
yeah. And I think like I do think a lot of that breeziness maybe can be attributed to Howard Hawks. I also feel like this is less fun than I kind of expect from a Howard Hawks movie. Also, like
Hmm.
I feel like I sit down and watch a Howard Hawks movie, I'm like, give me some. I want that like banter coming at me.
Yeah.
And there's some good banter in this, but it's like I want his Girl Friday level banter, which I realize like no other movie in existence can match that movie in terms
You
of
can't
like
you can't go that hard every time.
yeah, the speed in which the dialogue is delivered in that is like superhuman. So this movie doesn't have that going on, but it is fun.
Unless you have anything else, that leaves us with our final movie, Meet Me in St. Louis.
St. Louis or St. Louis?
Well,
Meet
I
me
don't
in St. Louis.
Meet Me in St. Louis. So
They
everybody's
when
singing,
they sing it, they do say Louis.
but then the little evil child tells someone, no, it's St. Louis.
Well, tell that to the songwriter.
So this is a Vincent Minnelli kind of Technicolor musical. It has very much. This is the first time that I've seen something that has the vibe of those like 1950s musicals.
Hmm.
The kind of sprawling, kind of cheery, simplistic musicals of the 50s, I guess.
Yeah. This movie's got some melancholy to it, but it is overall very bright and cheery, I would say. It is a movie that I feel like ultimately is about hey, St. Louis is a cool town because it's where I live, is what the main character says. And that's kind of the movie is mostly just like, hey, St. Louis, pretty cool town, huh?
Yeah, we're having a World's Fair.
Right? There's a bunch of people that live here, and they have lives that they got ups and downs, but at the end of the day, everything's dandy.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the letterboxed reviews of this movie. Someone was saying like that this is the only movie where the inspiring thing is that you stay in your Midwest town, and you find. But then the one that I really liked from Haley was, "This would be my Ladybird if I were a Midwestern 1940s teen," which
I mean, I that's probably very true. I'm sure it was for a lot of
yeah.
Midwestern 1940s teens. I mean, it's really kind of made. That's the target audience for this movie. I feel like
Yeah, yeah. So this, we were doing synopses for the other movies, but this movie is kind
this
of
movie,
just,
this kind of movie doesn't really have a plot. It's kind of just like a bunch of stuff happens and then
yeah,
it's done.
and yeah, it's kind of episodic, I guess, and so it was based on
Yeah.
some sort of serialized short stories, and I think that kind of shows in this. It's about a year in the life of, once again, like we were talking about this, people are posing as if they're not aristocratic, but they have a maid, right?
And
uh
they live in a massive mansion.
yeah, and they're like, oh, we'd have to live in a tenement home, and if we went to New York.
Oh.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's basically like the kind of main thrust of the movie is that the dad gets a job in New York, and so he ends up saying that we have to move, and so they have this kind of their last 6 months or something
Mhm.
in St. Louis, and they are reckoning with having to leave. Some of the daughters are trying to court boys, and that's part of the plot, and then some of the daughters are trying to kill a trolley full of people, and that's another plot.
You say that as a joke. That's just a thing that happens in the movie.
There's a cute little kid called Tootie that really is a bit of a demon.
Yeah.
And that really comes out in the
It
section of the
really
movie that's Halloween.
another movie set during Halloween, much
Yeah,
like Arsenic and Old Lace.
yeah,
Also, a movie that has plot points about gas lamps being turned off.
yes. Yeah, the
It's funny because
most
I watched this first and then I watched Gaslight, and it was very funny. I think I watched them back to back, and I was like, man, this 1944 has a weird thing with gas lamps.
one is a symbol of love, and the other one,
Right, exactly. And the other is a
yeah,
symbol of like control and nightmares.
yeah.
It reminded me a lot of Little Women, the Greta Gerwig movie. I haven't seen the other ones or read the book, but right, and it's about this family that with a bunch of daughters, and all the daughters have, they don't get along always, but they have, their different lives that they're all trying to figure out. And then the dad comes home, and in Little Women, when the dad comes home, it's like, oh, dad. The dad is just the warmest, kindest, most wonderful person.
And he owns every kind of classic car.
Exactly, exactly. He even has doubles and triples of some of the cars. But in this, the dad sucks and just wants to uproot his family because he got a slightly higher paying job, despite the fact that he clearly makes enough to live in this mansion in St. Louis.
I gotta look out for you guys. I gotta take any job that my boss tells me to
And
take.
then
I gotta
his
up.
his entire family is like, "No, we hate this. We don't want to move. Why would you even suggest that?" And he's like, I'm the dad. You have to do what I say." And he eventually does like go back on it, but it's for like a big chunk of the movie. He's just a stubborn dick to his whole family. And so it's like Little Women if the dad was a dick instead of a nice person. I also was kind of reminded of Gone with the Wind, just in the sense that this movie has this sort of very kind of nostalgic-y romantic idea of like, the South a little bit. It's not nearly as toxic as it is in Gone with the Wind. I don't think I wouldn't even say that this movie is problematic or toxic about it much at all. I mean, it's set post Civil War.
Yeah,
They don't bring up a lot of like race stuff, but I think
it's just 40
I think
years
in this
ago.
case it's okay. Yeah, it's sort of like, yeah, there probably would have been more of that in the 1900s in St. Louis, but like I think it's fine that this nice, colorful movie is like, we're not going to worry about that.
I mean, this is a movie this is equivalent to a movie being set in the 80s right now.
Which I thought about, that it's like not, because I think both this and Magnificent Ambersons, right, are like set around, kind of turn of the century times. And for whatever reason, as like a person in the 21st century watching it, I'm like, why are we setting movies in the 1900s? What a terrible time to be nostalgic about. But I get it. It's like the 30-year cycle or whatever. But right, it makes sense why people in the 40s would be like, the early 1900s, like, those were the days, right? And watching that now, I'm just like, oh, this like it's not. And a third movie, what's it called? How Green Was My Valley, that I feel
Mhm.
like is set in a similar time period and has this, very romantic, nostalgic viewpoint. And I don't. It's not that I don't get it, because I live in a much different time than they did, but for whatever reason, I'm like, I don't see the appeal. I
I
don't
guess
I don't see the appeal of the 1900s.
it's hard for me to say anything as the guy that is constantly wearing early 90s, late 80s shirts.
I
Uh,
mean, you're talking to the guy who's constantly wearing 1940s clothes. The worst time in like all of human history.
so you're saying that you endorse everything that happened in the 1940s?
Correct. Yeah, everything that happened in the decade of the 1940s. I fully endorse.
Uh,
I was my fingers were crossed that whole time. Whoa.
so yeah, it's Technicolor. It's a very pretty movie visually.
Yeah.
It's like you're just soaking in those nostalgic vibes with these hyper saturated colors. Somebody please make a LUT in order for everything to look like this.
They've tried. People keep trying to make Technicolor again. They can't do it.
It's tragic. It's really
Yeah.
tragic. And and this movie also has a bunch of really iconic songs in it.
Yeah. The trolley song.
We got ring, ring, ring goes the trolley, ding, ding, ding goes the bell.
That's the big one, I feel like.
Well, no, the big one is have yourself a merry little Christmas.
That doesn't come from this movie, does it?
Yes, it does.
Holy shit.
Yes, it
Oh
does.
well, in that case, yeah, that wins. I
Make
didn't
the
even realize that.
Yuletide gay. Yeah, a song that Judy Garland's character is singing to her sad little sister to kind of cheer her up, but it's almost like a melancholic Christmas because
Mm,
you know they're going to be moving away from St. Louis in a couple days. And yeah, that is the origin of this song.
wow. I can't believe, one, that I didn't realize that. but also just like, yeah, that's huge. That's a huge legacy for this movie to have.
Mhm.
Almost as big as I think this movie's biggest contribution to culture, that Liza Minnelli is a person because of this movie, because Vincent Minnelli met Judy Garland while making this movie.
And without Liza Minnelli, we would not have, say it with me, Arrested Development.
I was gonna say Lucille too, but yeah, same
Yeah,
answer.
Lucille too.
So gotta hand it to this movie for that alone. I mean, the Halloween section. I think we gotta talk about that. We mentioned it briefly.
Yeah. Like it's kind of, yes, this movie kind of like dips in on every season over the course of
Mhm.
the year, but it kind of sits in those Halloween vibes for a while. And I think probably what you're about to say is that it gives us some insight into some very weird turn of the century Halloween traditions.
Yeah, well, it's really going hard on the idea of Halloween being like Devil's Night, where all the children go out and they cause mischief and they do a lot of pranks, and their pranks usually involve just like kind of attacking people or like messing up their house, or in this case, throwing flour on people.
And if you make the flour a little wet, it sticks a little better,
Right, which
says
is right.
Grandpa.
Trick or treat originally, right? Trick or treat was like you either give out
There's
a
a
treat or
threat.
you get tricked. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's sort of like give
Get
me candy
tricked.
or I'll yeah, give me candy or I'll throw wet flour in your face.
They should bring that back, honestly. I think that's great.
I agree. I agree. I think people still like TP houses, right? But that's about it. Even
I've
that I feel like
never
has gone by the wayside.
I don't think I've ever genuinely seen that happen. But with the TPing houses, right? That's like an implicit threat. Like if you are walking up and going, "I have flour in my hand. I will throw it at you if you don't give me candy right now." Like
Well,
that's a
see,
power
Tootie
move.
doesn't even ask for candy. She just rings the doorbell and throws flour at a guy.
And she says, "I hate you," too.
Which is the other Halloween tradition that we've lost is instead of saying trick or treat, saying I hate you.
I hate you. Get floured. Get tricked.
Tootie being like the youngest sister, she really wants to partake in all the Halloween mischief, but everyone's like, no, you're too young, you're too young. So she volunteers to go to the scariest house in the neighborhood where the scary people live. And there's a big dog that's there. But she does it. She goes up and throws flour at a guy and says, I hate you, and runs away. And then everyone likes and respects her in her community.
See, this was the moment where I was like, what is this movie doing? Because you would think that, a child like would learn a lesson and it would tie into the themes of the movie or something. And like I
No,
don't
it,
really
it increases her penchant for mischief. It further reinforces that this is what she should be doing with her life.
But yeah, it's just like it's a thing that happens, right? It's a thing that
Yeah,
happens
yeah,
in her life, and it doesn't like this moment of her kind of earning the respect of the other children, or this moment of her being like randomly cruel to this guy. Like it doesn't really tie into anything else in the movie.
the people in the house he thinks are really scary. The guy is just kind of like perplexed by having the flour thrown at him. He's just like, "Hey, that was mean."
Well, it's like one of those classic situations where like kids are like like you're saying, like that's the scary house, right? We don't go up
Yeah,
to there. We're scared of them. And then in every
yeah,
movie they're like, "Oh, they're actually nice."
yeah.
This movie didn't even go that far. It was just like they got floured and then we move on.
And then right there's the whole trolley thing where like, what do they do? They like throw a fake dead body in front of a trolley,
Yeah, and like
hoping that it will get derailed.
yeah. You horrible 7-year-old, you could have killed dozens of people.
And I'm like, correct. Yes, that is like that. That's not like childhood mischief. That's just a crime.
She's just like, I can't be charged as an adult, so
Right. Yeah. That's the only reason she did it. She knew that she could get away with it. We got a big Christmas Eve ball, right? And there's a whole thing where like Esther doesn't have a dress to go to the ball, and who's gonna be at the ball, and I don't want to go to the ball by myself, and I don't know. I'm a little. Maybe it's just the fact that I didn't grow up in a affluent. I never went to balls as a child. I don't know. I find that stuff hard to relate to.
I mean, also because we were homeschooled, we didn't go to dances, and I feel like that's like probably the analog. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're probably both somewhat too young. I mean, dance cards I think were already kind of out of fashion by by the 90s anyway. Yeah, I don't know. I find that stuff it's nice to look at in a Technicolor movie, but I find it hard to get emotionally invested in it, I guess.
Yeah. I think this movie's fine.
Yeah. I think this, similarly to the last one, is a great movie to throw on. Especially like maybe around Christmas. I think it is sort of a standby Christmas movie for a lot of people.
I think like the kind of the pointlessness of it rubs me the wrong way a little bit, and so I feel like this is a movie to throw on in the background, where To Have and To Have Not is a movie to actually watch, but in a chill way with commercials in
Mm.
between.
Okay, okay. Well, no, not we don't want commercials in our
I'm just saying,
movies.
like if it's on TV or something like that,
Sure, sure.
I'd watch it on TV.
There's a big to do about a phone call in this movie and various sort of phone call dramas, and I think it is notable and kind of funny how little phone communication has changed in the last 120 years. That it's like all of the like phone drama like would translate 100% to now.
I mean,
The like miscommunication stuff, like misunderstanding aspects of it, the like I guess there's a bit of sort of like a phone call is going to happen at 6:30 exactly, and like we need to like clear the room.
yeah, and also like it's a long distance call. Can you believe that? He's calling all the way from New York.
It just feels contemporary in the sense that like yeah, people talking on the phone hasn't changed really. I don't know. There is some really good performances I think in this movie. I think there is some real moments of pathos, some very funny bits. I think the kid who plays Tootie is very good at feeling like a just genuine kid. Like it doesn't feel like she's
Mhm.
performing really.
Mhm.
I forget if it's her, like Judy Garland or one of the people. I just remember there was a scene in this where someone was crying, and I was like, this feels like real crying. Like this doesn't feel like movie crying where you're like
Hmm.
kind of trying to look glamorous about it. It's like this just belligerent crying.
Well, I guess that wraps it up.
Yeah. Did you have a favorite film of 1944?
For me, it's kind of a toss-up between Double Indemnity and Gaslight. Maybe let's say Gaslight. I think Gaslight's my favorite.
Okay.
I thought that the psychodrama was incredible. To be honest, very very good.
I'm kind of torn between two also, one of them also being Double Indemnity, but I do think I have to give it to Arsenic and Old Lace just because like that movie is so fun and so just joyous and silly and absurd. I really love Double Indemnity. Like it's a really great hard-boiled noir movie. It's like it has everything you want. I guess other than like a detective character, the way that Laura does. I feel like Arsenic and Old Lace has like it's got it all.
Yeah,
And
that's a fun one.
by it all, I mean Peter Lorre wearing a goofy pith helmet, talking about Panama and murder, and it's great.
Well, that about does it for this episode. Thank you all for listening. Thanks to Sarah for joining, and Glenn.
Yeah.
I'll see you next year.
See you next year.